Hello everyone, Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as a Kryptonian in Marvel Part 4. If you enjoy this content, smash the like button. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description.
"This is frankly getting ridiculous," said William Harris, a fellow board member of Vex Corp. Syrian couldn't agree more, but the man insisted on tagging along when he presented the idea of meeting Tony Stark to discuss a possible collaboration in the clean energy project. When he pitched the idea, the board was instantly against any collaboration, especially in the rabbit hole that'd be the clean energy project. The board was working under the assumption that it was a waste of investment when they could funnel resources into defense contracts. Especially in the wake of the military approving a defense contract for his shielders and restoration discs. The military also asked for another project involving the restoration discs with some modifications, which were most certainly going to be a cash cow. So, as far as funding goes, Vex Corp was about to get flooded with dollars. His deal with President Thicket was already bearing fruit as they also got priority contracts for upgrading military hardware and communications, and there was even a lucrative project for precision satellites that'd add the accuracy of GPS. The intelligence agencies were about to launch a month-long review of the company to see whether Vex Corp was complying with certain codes to operate as a defense contractor. So, with the government going through their books, the board was convinced there was no need for collaboration with Stark Industries. Most of the board members had a bone to pick with Tony Stark, while the rest thought it was a bad idea to collaborate with a competitor just when they were on the precipice of breaking into the defense sector. Most of all, the board was concerned with the manic personality interface of Tony Stark bombing them all to Kingdom Come with his stunts. Everyone acknowledged Tony Stark was a once-in-a-millennium genius, but the man had a unique ability to piss off people and make enemies wherever he went. It didn't help, the guy was totally dismissive of other people and their feelings. Sitting in one of the guest rooms of Stark Industries' CA office, Syrian added one more character flaw in regard to Tony Stark. The man has no respect for other people's valuable time. Syrian had gone out of his way to book a meeting with the man. What does the man do? Ditch them for 4 bloody long hours doing who knows what. That prick could be having an orgy for all we know. Mr. Harris growled, glaring coldly around the guest room. Syrian doubted that's the case, but what would he know? It's not actually outside the realm of possibility. He was tempted to find out what Stark was doing, but he beat down the urge. It'd be an invasion of privacy, but most of all, he didn't like spying on people unless he knew they were out to get him. Thankfully, the door to their room swung open at that moment. Syrian hoped it was Stark, but unfortunately, it was the skilled sidekick/secretary Pepper Potts. She was a beautiful woman with golden blonde hair and brown eyes. Her smile was disarming in a way that tried to convey her sympathy for her boss's tardiness. "Sorry for the wait, gentlemen. Mr. Stark is ready to see you now." Well, it was better late than never. Relieved that coming here was not going to become a total waste of time, he followed Stark's trusted secretary out of the guest room. So, what was he doing all this time? Sleeping with some cheap bitch he found on the street, snarked William. Syrian gave the man a warning look. It'd seem dear Willie had some unresolved issues with Tony Stark, and the silent treatment he incurred for the last 4 hours seems to have brought up all the anger the man must have suppressed. "Mr. Stark is terribly sorry for keeping you gentlemen waiting. He had to take an unscheduled appointment with his doctor." Pepper explained with a placid smile adorning her youthful face. "I hope the son of bitch got AIDS." Syrian heard William mutter darkly. Hoping not to cause any offense, he decided to intervene before his companion decided to blow a gasket. "We understand, Miss Potts. I hope Mr. Stark is feeling well," Syrian said politely. "Of course." Pepper gave him a thankful smile. Holding out a door for them, she waved them in. "Please, Mr. Stark is waiting for you." Being the secretary of an egotistical sociopath like Tony Stark must surely be a taxing job. The last thing he wanted was for the poor woman to get the brunt of their ire when it should be directed at the man inside. So, Syrian let William enter first before turning to address Pepper. "I apologize on his behalf. He has not been having a good day." Pepper gave him an understanding smile and a nod. Feeling a bit better, he squared his shoulders and entered the office of the CEO of Stark Industries. A few minutes into the meeting, he was bemoaning the fact that he was saddled with William Harris. The board must have known Stark and Harris had a history. They must have intentionally had Harris accompany him to sabotage this meeting. It didn't help. Stark's fragile ego couldn't help but antagonize Harris from time to time. "So, how are the wife and children?" asked Tony, wearing a customary smirk while leaning back in his chair. "None of your business, Stark," Harris growled back. "Charming. So, what's the business here, guys? I have other things to do than have a staring contest with one of my ex's cousins," said Tony, turning his attention back to the computer screen. "Rachel is my sister, you prick," Harris growled and was about to stand from his seat, but Syrian pulled him down at the last second. "Oh, dear Christmas ghost," Syrian thought. He had to intervene before a brawl started in the office. "You may not know me, Mr. Stark. My name is..." Syrian started. "Syrian Vex. I know who you are. Strange name, by the way. Come to the point, pal." Tony smoothly cut in without taking his eyes away from the screen. "As a part of Vex Corp's expansion into the energy sector, we are interested in pursuing renewable energy. We estimate we will be fielding energy-efficient solar panels by next year. However, I'd like to take this a step further and pursue clean energy in more depth. And I believe there is a chance for your company to benefit from this as well." "Oh. Do tell," said Tony, raising his eyebrow. "I believe your arc reactor project is a viable path towards cheap and clean energy. Vex Corp is interested in joining the research with Stark Industries. Failing that, we would like to purchase the patents you have filed for the arc reactor so that we may pursue the research on our own." "So, this is what you want?" Tony asked, rubbing his hands while looking at the two of them, finally taking his eyes away from the computer screen. "Well, yes," Syrian replied, a tad bit confused by Stark's lack of reaction. "I understand you may need time to think this over and perhaps even notify your board. We would be happy to wait." "The answer is no," Tony interrupted. Now, this stunned Syrian. Of all the things he expected from this meeting, he had hoped not to get a blanket no. "Mr. Stark, I implore you to reconsider. Together, we can accelerate the development of..." But, once again, Syrian was cut off. "It's not about you, pal. It's about legacy." "Legacy, Mr. Stark? I don't think legacy would be the priority when we are talking about cheap and clean energy for the whole planet," Syrian countered. "I never took you for a hippie. But this day is full of surprises." Tony chuckled. Syrian was starting to get why his board had warned him not to approach Stark. But he let the insult wash away and focused on the task at hand. "Mr. Stark, what I supposedly am or am not is the issue here. Surely you can see the advantages of cooperation. If you give me the time, I can present you with some of my ideas." Tony raised his palm, prompting Syrian to pause. "Let me stop you there. The arc reactor was my father's dream project, and he passed away before it could become a reality. So, the arc reactor has some sentimental value for me, even if my father was a cold, calculating man. I'm not willing to let that go," Tony said sharply. "We are not asking you to let go of your father's legacy, Mr. Stark," Syrian said patiently. "I'm afraid Stark Industries will pursue the arc reactor project exclusively. If that's all, gentlemen. Sirian realized Stark was not going to budge on the issue. He had imagined himself and Stark working together and propelling mankind to the stars in a decade. But it'd seem he'd have to do the heavy lifting all by himself. Perhaps it was silly of him to assume Tony Stark was interested in the progress of humanity. Also, he could see where Stark was coming from. The reactor may indeed mean more to Tony than he assumed. Sirian got to his feet, seeing no point in continuing this conversation. He could read Stark's resolve, and the guy was not going to budge an inch. Perhaps there would come a time when they might collaborate, but it was certainly not now. In that case, I do apologize for taking your time, Mr. Stark, Sirian said, shaking Tony Stark's hand before acknowledging Pepper Potts with a nod. Miss Potts. And just like that, they were out of Stark Industries HQ. Once both Sirian and Harris were inside the car, Harris turned to him with the most sincere apology. I'm sorry for how I behaved. But there is only so much of Stark's ego I can take. Sirian was quite sure the board insisted on sending this guy with him to ensure no positive result emerged. He was also not blind to just who Harris represents and the undercurrent within his company's investors. If HYDRA thought they were playing him from the shadows, they were in for a rude awakening. He was quite aware that Harris and many members of his board were puppets left there to orient him in the direction of Hydra's design. It was a clever ploy on their part to infiltrate his board through the banks and his financiers that represented their stakes in his company. While they were ignorantly thinking they'd maneuvered him to the way they wanted, that's exactly what he was looking forward to. A trail of money and phone calls was left in the wake of Hydra's activities inside his firm. Using this, he slowly built up a profile of their members, from the roots to the highest echelons of the organization. If you are still open to collaborating with a reputable company, then I'm sure there are other better prospective partners who are far more agreeable than Tony Stark, said Harris. And there it is. It only took the man a few minutes to bring this up. Sirian thought amusedly. Who are you suggesting, Mr. Harris? He asked, curious to see who the other puppets Hydra had in store for him were. Justin Hammer of Hammer Industries, and if not them, there is Oscorp. I'd caution you against the latter, as there are rumors Norman Osborn is not right in the head. People have not seen the man in public for years. If you ask me, Hammer Industries will be up your speed. So, what do you say? Sirian stared at William Harris out of the corner of his eye. He could technically reject the offer. He could even strong-arm the board if he wants to, but why create friction this early on? While HYDRA was most certainly setting a trap, he saw an opportunity. Besides, an organization like Hydra was standing on a shaky foundation. They have most certainly thrived, but they stay in the shadows for a reason. They depend on blackmail, corruption, and subterfuge to bolster their numbers and allies. This means Hydra can be eliminated if he plays his cards right and positions himself this early in the game. Can you arrange a meeting with Justin Hammer, possibly after Christmas? Jane let out a sigh of relief as she saw her boyfriend exiting the terminal. The flight was a few hours delayed, and she had been waiting all this time, bored out of her mind. As if to complicate matters, her dad was constantly calling her to check up on her every 10 minutes or so. After the incident in Culver, her dad developed a paranoid streak that was getting on her nerves. She could hardly go anywhere without the shadow of her father's paranoia reaching out towards her in some form. Last day, when she went out for some grocery shopping, her father had secretly followed her around the city. Her father, who had never managed a gun in his whole life, was now spending hours on gun ranges practicing with different guns. It didn't help that she got injured from that carjacking last year. Frankly, it was getting very disturbing. She was planning on forcing her dad to take some counseling after the Christmas holidays. With his present state of mind, she worried he might do something dangerous. You look like a zombie. That was the first thing her boyfriend said, greeting her. Really? That's the first thing you've got to say? Jane deadpanned. As compensation, she got a small peck on her lips. Forget anything I just said. I've got jet lag, and you look lovely as always, said Syrian, pulling her to his side with his right arm wrapped around her shoulder while the other held his luggage. That better be the reason. You had me cancel all our plans for Spain, and now you are insulting my looks. That's strike 2 in my book. Well, how about a trip to the Netherlands? Syrian asked while slipping his luggage into Jane's car. I'll take Spain any day over the Netherlands. Jane scrunched her nose. Hey, don't write them off the bat. You may find yourself loving the place. Not likely. If I want to freeze my ass off, then I wouldn't have to travel to Europe for that. Jane scoffed. Or we could go to the Netherlands and come back via Spain, Syrian suggested. Let me think about it, said Jane, acting as if she was reluctant to agree when she was anything but. A trip to Europe might just be the perfect thing that could happen for her. It could let her unwind and forget about the difficulties back home. Above all that, she gets to spend some quality time with her alien boyfriend, who has been away for some time. Either way, this was going to be their second Christmas together, and she intended to make the most out of it. Enrique flipped through channels on the TV, bored out of his mind. He was all alone in his home with no one to help him. In his present situation, he needed all the help he could get, but most of his healthy friends abandoned him. Those who were not as healthy as he were in far worse condition than he was. A year ago, he was the king of the streets. Now, he lived in fear of being thrown out of his home and on the street. He had to spend all his money and influence to stay out of jail, but no amount of money or influence would allow him to walk again. The demon saw to it that his spine remained dysfunctional. He went by the name Baker in the streets. People used to fear him, but these days, he was the butt of all the conversations in the neighborhood. He hated how powerless he had become. He hated the fact that he was stuck here while the demon that did this to him got away scot-free. So, you want revenge, Enrique? A voice whispered from behind Enrique, making his skin crawl. He adjusted the wheelchair so that he was looking at his visitor. It was an old man wearing a black coat and a walking stick, an expensive stick based on the silver handle and the shiny gems encrusted on it. Who are you? How did you get inside my home? He asked, palming the gun he kept on his lap. I go by many names, dear Enrique. My name is not important. What is important is you and your revenge against the one who turned you to this state. Now that piqued his interest. The very thought of that demon made his blood boil. You can make the son of bitch pay for what he did to me? He asked eagerly. I can make him bleed a river of blood and drown in a sea of despair. But first, what would you give me in return for seeing your most hated enemy broken and crawling through the streets before meeting his end? The old man asked, a creepy smile on his wrinkled face. I would give anything to see that happen. I want him dead. No, I want him to beg for death. Enrique screamed, anger and hate flooding his mind. My price is your soul. Enrique broke out into laughter as he heard the old man's strange demand. Perhaps he was imagining all of this, and this dream would end soon. I don't care what you take. If you want my soul, take it. But I need to see that demon beg for his life. Enrique screamed. That can be arranged, said the old man before plunging his hand straight into Enrique's heart. Enrique stared with wide eyes at the hand spearing into his heart. Blood was oozing out of his heart, and he looked at the old man as if seeing him for the first time. What? What's happening? Warg. Enrique let out a blood-curdling scream as he felt his whole body tear itself apart. His bones began to break and grow out, piercing his muscles and tendons. He felt himself rise to his feet even as his whole body was tearing itself apart. He also felt like he was gaining height, which was strange. He had always been a bit short comparatively. The pain he was feeling tripled all of a sudden, and he began to claw at his face. The human skin on his body began to peel off, and instead, blood-red hardened skin began to take its place. He screamed some more, but ever so slowly, Enrique began to feel an unholy strength permeate his limbs. His hair fell away, and instead, his skin began to grow fur. He could hear the beating of his heart, and it was pounding away at a pace unfamiliar to his ears. 2 bullish horns began to sprout from his temples. He could see the crooked horns growing all the way out, long enough to skewer someone to death. The strength he felt in his limbs was unlike anything he had ever felt. It felt as if he could stop a moving train all by himself. Perhaps he could even crush a mountain. Fisting his arm, he suddenly turned around and punched the wall of his home. To his delight, his arm punched through the wall with nominal effort. Enrique flinched when his arm suddenly caught fire. To his surprise, the fire didn't seem to harm him. Fascinated by this, he pulled back his arm and observed the red flames dancing on the skin of his arms. Feeling an epiphany, Enrique jabbed his right arm in the direction of his TV. Red-hot flames roared out of his palm and consumed his TV whole, turning it into a pile of ash within seconds. The flames began to quickly spread into the rest of his home. Enrique was not bothered, nor was he fearful of getting burned to death. Instead, he looked into a mirror hanging on a wall. The first thing he noticed was the bright, slitted red eyes burning with power and hate. His face was unrecognizable and no longer human. He was a mix of a bull and a jackal. Staring back at him was the face of a jackal with bullish horns and red fur all over the body. Even a red tail flickered into his line of sight. "I've given you the power to crush your enemy. Now, come with me, Enrique. Come with me and take your revenge," the old man offered. "Enrique. That's no longer my name. Call me the baker." He let out a yell and stomped hard on the ground. A pillar of flames erupted all around him, spreading far and wide into not just his home but the entire neighborhood. The screams of his neighbors only fueled the intensity of his flames, which began to consume anything and everything. The old man watched all of this with a wicked smirk. "It looks like there will be quite a lot of souls coming into my realm. Now, let's see who wins this round, my nemesis," the old man thought before disappearing into a portal. Syrian blinked his eyes rapidly in an effort to wake up. He tried to stretch out his limbs, but he encountered resistance in the form of Jane. She was lying on top of Syrian with her head nestling on the crook of his neck. He tried to extract his right hand, but he couldn't free it without disturbing Jane. Using his left hand, he rubbed the sleep out of his eyes before looking at the alarm clock. The darkness in the room shielded the alarm clock from his eyes. A notion that was quite impossible considering his status as an enhanced Kryptonian. But, over the months of his long training, he learned to withdraw the energy permeating his body to an isolated position. This helped him relatively experience what the humans of this world could experience. After all, no one would find it thrilling to hear hundreds of thousands of sounds from every living organism 24/7. Thanks to the necklace that shielded his senses, Syrian was able to train and learn to suppress his energy within his body. Of course, doing so had its own dangers. Having untold amounts of energy isolated to different parts of his body was a disaster waiting to happen. Knowing this, Syrian developed a small remedy in the form of energy absorption pellets. Now, draining the energy was no easy task. It was not as if his body hosted some electrical energy. However, every form of energy has a certain frequency and wavelength. After all, energy is a collection of photons, and it has a specific or sometimes fluctuating radiation of some form. This intrinsic property of energy gave him the idea to use the one thing that can absorb large quantities of energy. Vibranium. Sirian designed a suppression disk which hosted vibranium pellets that could absorb excess energy from his body. To that end, he plugged in 2 suppression disks right behind his knees. Even with vibranium's enormous energy capacity, he needed to change the suppression disks daily due to the enormous excess energy his body was bleeding out. Thanks to these suppression disks, he could enjoy his time as a human without worrying too much. It also helped that the suppression disks could be used as a battery for his battle suit. Reaching out with his left hand, Sirian reached for the alarm clock. Hey! Sirian abandoned his struggle to reach for the alarm clock when Jane was awake and looking at him. Hey, he greeted back as he felt Jane shift beneath the covers. Did I wake you? Obviously, she purred against his skin as she stretched in bed. Sorry. Don't be. I like this, said Jane, pushing herself over so that she was now almost fully lying on top of Sirian. Really? He asked, bemused. We don't get as much time as we used to for ourselves. You are busy doing whatever it is you are doing, and I'm busy with my research. We rarely talk. Jane murmured against his skin. The warm sensation of Jane's warm breath caressing his skin was quite therapeutic. The one good thing about locking away his powers was that he could enjoy his 5 senses like a normal human being. Most of the time the super senses were a hassle. We talk on the phone, Sirian pointed out. Jane lightly pushed him playfully. That's not the same, and you know it. We don't see each other that much. Alright. Point taken. I'll visit more often, Sirian promised. You better. I meant to ask this before, but I didn't want to breach the subject on the phone. Why are you pulling some weird stunts lately? What did you mean? Sirian asked, playing ignorant. You have been making some visits to hospitals across the country. Jane murmured, but Sirian could hear the silent accusation behind her words. Just thought I'd help around, he shrugged. Strange you didn't help out anyone other than 9/11 victims, Jane observed. Sirian hoped his noncommittal reply would dissuade Jane from pursuing this topic. It also doesn't escape me that you make random appearances here and there right after some speech is delivered by the president. What's up with that? Oh, come on, Jane. Don't you have anything else to talk about right now? Just as the question left his mouth, a gunshot was heard, giving them pause. You hear that? That's my father training with his gun. I didn't know your father was a gun enthusiast, Sirian said, a bit surprised. He talked with the man last night, and the guy was chill. The image that Sirian had of Jane's father was a super nerd with control issues. At least, that's what he got from Jane in their earlier talks. He wasn't. With the recent Gamma spill and religious nutjobs crashing planes into buildings, my father got a kick-start on his paranoid streak. It doesn't help the whole country is ready to ride into a crusade or something. Jane said the last part with an obvious accusation in her tone. Oh, come on. Just drop politics, and let's talk about something else. Or maybe let's not talk at all, he growled hotly into Jane's ear while his fingers trailed sensually over her bare back, their destination made clear when they sank into her soft derriere. While Sirian managed to successfully distract Jane in bed, their discussion was only postponed for the time being. It reared its head back when they were having dinner. This time, it was Mr. Foster's fault for switching on the TV. It was the day after Christmas night. Channels should be broadcasting Christmas-themed programs. However, news broadcasters across the board were showing a mosque being burned down in Nevada. It was also accompanied by a press release by the White House condemning the attack on the Indian parliament by terrorists. The White House also let it slip that the December 13 attack on the Indian parliament was financed by Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. The White House pulling off a political spiel was not so surprising or a contentious issue. But, the crowd outside the Nevada mosque were quite shocking. They were carrying crosses and calling nothing short of a crusade. See? This is what happens when religion and politics get mixed, claimed Jane. You talk as if that's not been the case since the founding of this nation. The Constitution may advocate for the separation of church and state, but the voters decide who gets to take office. They care whether the leaders of the free world are religious or not, said Mr. Foster. That was not always the case. Look at Lincoln. He was certainly willing to war with his own nation despite the Confederacy using the Bible to support the practices of slavery. Jane argued. You think Lincoln was an atheist? Asked Mr. Foster incredulously. I think so. Jane said petulantly. I hope not. That'd mean all his references to God in his earlier speeches were purely political. Syrian interjected, earning surprised looks from the Fosters. I like to read Lincoln's speeches. It's a hobby, he explained. I really should stop butting into needless politics. Syrian cursed himself and his big mouth. Good for you, Syrian, said Mr. Foster before turning on Jane. You should learn more about our past before making claims like that. After saying that, Mr. Foster left the table to watch TV from the couch. This left Syrian alone with Jane, who was not at all appreciative of his opinions. Just what are you doing? Asked Jane in a hushed whisper. Just saying my 2 cents. I'm trying to help my dad out of his paranoia. I don't need you bombing my efforts, but a little help would be appreciated, Jane said. I think you are overreacting a bit here. Your father looks fine to me. He may have just suddenly come to like guns, that's all, he said, shrugging his shoulders. You may not know this, but the United States is more than just the 2 coasts. There is a middle portion in this country, and they are gearing up for a crusade ever since 9/11. People are buying guns like candy for children. So, trust me. I'm not overreacting, said Jane, her nose flaring up with suppressed anger. Anger at what? He didn't know. Syrian certainly hoped it was not directed at him. Besides, he was sure Jane was exaggerating a lot, mostly because of the usual activist types hijacking the universities and blowing everything out of proportion. It was the basic characteristic of all fringe elements of all political movements. All right. I'll keep my mouth shut. Just what exactly are you hoping to do with your father? He is a grown man. You cannot just lock away his gun in a safe or something. Syrian pointed out. I know that. I just want him to take a counseling session. He needs professional help, not guns. Jane let out a frustrated groan. Holy Mother of God! Mr. Foster shouted, startling both Jane and Syrian. Both of them looked at the TV to which Mr. Foster was pointing, and their eyes widened at what was on it. Fury sat in his office, staring coldly at the live feed of the events transpiring in Nevada. He was not interested in the law and order situation. As far as he was concerned, that was the headache of the FBI and local PD. No. He was rather concerned with what happened after the mosque was burned by the crowd full of lunatics. Fury didn't take his eyes away from the pillar of unnatural fire reaching into the sky where the mosque once stood. The flame was almost 300 feet high. While this was a cause for concern, the real kicker was the bullish creature that stepped out of the pillar of fire. It looked like a creature straight out of the gates of hell. What the hell am I looking at? He threw the question open for the occupants of his office. We have no idea, Director. This is something not in our database. However, we got a similar energy signature match from a small town in Louisiana, said Coulson, handing over a thin file. Fury quickly went through the report. Unfortunately, it was quite inconclusive. There were no findings that interested him except for the similarities in thermal radiation and the extensive damage the land took in the aftermath. There were also 2 missing cases connected to the Louisiana incident. Looking through the report, Fury asked what came to his mind. "Is this report accurate?" "Yes, sir. We cross-checked the readings from our satellite scans of Nevada. It'd seem the first incident went under the radar," said Coulson. "This complicates things." Fury mused out loud. They'd be walking in blind to what was happening in Nevada. For an intelligence agency, their whole planning and action revolve around valuable intelligence. Walking into an evolving situation on the ground without conclusive information was suicide. It left too many things up for chance and luck. That was something Fury hated, cause there was always a price tag attached to situations like this. However, just because he hated the situation doesn't mean he could ignore it, especially with the supernatural elements in the mix. "Do we have any assets on the ground?" Fury asked. "Not at the moment, sir. But we do have a 3-minute window to call in an airstrike and a 10-minute window for agents to take the field," Coulson reported. Fury once again looked at the live feed and watched as the fiery creature burned people alive while laughing maniacally. It looked like the creature was enjoying inflicting pain and suffering. It was certainly not pulling back any punches. There were a few gunshots involved, and he even saw some petrol bombs being thrown at the creature, but to no effect. "I get the feeling that our agents won't be much of an effect on this one. I want our best analysts working on the weaknesses of this thing. Also, cross-reference the data we have from our satellites with other incidents. Scramble a couple of F-15s and put them on standby. I want armored vehicles on the ground, making a perimeter all armed to the teeth with anti-tank weaponry. Have the choppers lined up with cannons and enough ammo that can blow this bastard back to hell." Fury paused as he squared his one good eye at his most trusted man in the room, and Coulson, "Bring in Barton." Coulson nodded and took his leave, making Fury focus on others in his office. "I want the civilians outside of the perimeter Coulson makes. Call in the National Guard, the Army, or even the Easter Bunny if you have to. I want nothing to breach the perimeter." After he made some more arrangements, he called Agent Hill. Just as Hill reported to his office, he took SHIELD to Level 5 alert. "Agent Hill, reach out to Vex." "Sir," she looked at him cautiously. "Tell him that I will owe him a favor. We are out of our depth here, Agent." "We will take all the help we can get," said Fury. "As you wish, sir." Maria nodded. Fury watched Agent Hill leave and let out a sigh. He eyed the phone on his desk for some time before making a decision. He took the phone and connected it to one of his many secretaries. "Get me, Alexander Pierce." Screams tore through the night sky while long tongues of fire touched the clouds. Looking down from the chopper, Barton took in the hellish scene below and gulped nervously. He could make out movement on the ground where 2 inhuman creatures were making a mess out of Fury's perimeter. The Army and SHIELD personnel were way out of their depths in dealing with the threat, and it showed on the ground. The creature wielding a gun that spat out hellish fires set armored vehicles ablaze. It seemed to be trying to rendezvous with the other creature, the one with horns. "Coulson, are you seeing this?" Barton asked into the comms. "I wish I was dreaming, Agent Barton. But, yeah. I'm seeing this," came the reply. "Well, you've got a problem on your way. Trap 1, the one with the gun, is heading your way," said Barton as he traced the path of the creature, which easily reduced vehicles into ash as it trampled everything in its path. "Barton, do you have eyes on Trap 1? Coulson asked from the comms. "Yep. Trap 1 has more range as it is using some kind of gun that appears to be a plasma weapon," Barton reported. "What's the range of this weapon?" Can't say for sure. Maybe a 100 feet, based on the performance so far. But I wouldn't be surprised if it has more range. What about damage? Asked Coulson. Catastrophic. Trap 1 can reduce an armored vehicle into ashes in less than a minute. Barton reported. For a minute, there was static from the other end. Acknowledged. Strike Team 2, you are authorized to use cannons and other heavy weaponry. I repeat, all weapons are hot against Trap 1. Coulson's voice from the comms came this time, and the message was for everyone. Barton looked at the fellow men inside the chopper. Well, you heard Agent Coulson. Let's give them hell. Weapons hot, the pilot said before taking a sharp round with the chopper. Barton held onto his bow and made sure his equipment was strapped tight on his back. He slowly pushed the doors open as the chopper aligned with the roofs of a nearby building. Well, let's do our job, people. Barton shouted before he secured himself onto a wire and jumped off the chopper, followed by his team. The minute Barton's feet hit the ground, he was on the move. He quickly disengaged from the wire and ran as fast as his legs could carry. His eyes strayed towards the carnage down below, where the creature was spewing out fire and plasma like it was a walk in the park. The sheer amount of civilian lives lost in the incident was another thing to worry about if this whole thing could be wrapped up. Barton wouldn't lose any sleep over some radical mob getting some medicine of their own, but on a spreadsheet, the body count matters. Hardly anyone was going to write the dead off as insignificant, his personal opinion notwithstanding. Besides, there were bound to be other casualties aside from the mob that burned the mosque. The reaction to this whole debacle was also something he was not looking forward to. Barton paused after he made a final leap into a building with a good vantage point. His team was suitably spread out and ready to turn the heat on the rampaging creature down below. Strike Team in position, he asked through the comms. In position, sir. After getting the confirmation, he opened the channel to the chopper's pilot. Strike Team in position. Bring the rain. The pilot positioned the chopper against Trap 1 and made a nosedive with weapons hot. The street down below was bombarded with heavy cannon fire as well as anti-tank missiles. The weaponry tore through vehicles, roads and other nearby utilities. Looking down from his vantage point, Barton looked through his night vision goggles to take stock of the target. Trap 1 has slowed down. Strike Team, you are clear to engage. Barton's order was carried out, and his team started to shell out some RPG rounds and some pyrotechnic charges on the creature. Early engagements with Trap 1 and Trap 2 had shown virtually no effect while using normal bullets. Incendiary attacks, on the other hand, with enough explosive force, seemed to at least challenge both Trap 1 and Trap 2. As his team provided the necessary cover fire, the chopper pulled out of the nosedive and prepared to put some distance. Barton locked the settings on explosive arrows and patiently waited for his team's cover fire to dwindle. When his team paused their attack, Barton took aim with an arrow and waited for the dust to clear. From the sky, the chopper took up a stationary position and flashed its light on the creature's location. As the dust and smoke slowly ebbed away, there was no sign of the creature. Does anyone have eyes on Trap 1? Barton asked into the comms. Negative, sir. He got a string of negatives from the team, which made Barton seek out the chopper. Use the thermal scanner. Scan all the buildings and find the target. Barton waited for the creature's location while he looked for any sign of the enemy. Sir, thermal readings are all over the place. We can't get an accurate reading. Barton uttered a few choice curses under his breath before ordering his team to change their positions. It'd be the height of stupidity to maintain the same position when facing an enemy of this caliber. Just as Barton gave the order and was about to contact Coulson to keep an eye out for Trap 1, a manhole cover blew straight into the air with an ocean of steam pushing it straight up with tremendous force. Time seemed to slow down for Barton as he watched the manhole cover smash right into the face of the gunman on the chopper. The steel cover didn't stop there and smashed into the blades of the chopper right after the gunman. The chopper veered off, and the blades were taking heavy damage. Barton had to abandon his post as the chopper's tail smashed into the building he was perched. He could hear the concrete get ground by the chopper's tail and hear the blades cut through the air, drawing ever closer to his position. By some stroke of luck, the chopper got stuck on the roof, thanks to the concrete and steel bars acting as a hook to prevent it from falling onto the street. Barton got to his feet and was about to rescue the survivors from the crash when a plasma bolt, which looked more and more like a glob of lava, struck the chopper's fuel tank. Barton had only a split second to react, so he dived for cover behind a thick concrete wall. The heat from the explosion was almost unbearable, and he thought he was a goner. Despite the cover, Barton's suit caught fire, and he had to roll on the ground to put out the fire. This action, unfortunately, attracted the attention of the creature. It was the first time Barton was face to face with the creature, and it was truly a sore sight for his eyes. The creature had an outward, near-human appearance, but Barton knew it was anything but human. Both of the creature's hands were made of metal. One hand had claws, while the other was made in the form of a gun. The skin on the creature hugged into its bones, giving it a starved look. It had a bald head with sprouts of dark hair here and there. An eye patch covered the face of the creature, which, for some reason, was steaming. "Come, little human. Your soul will ensure the sleep that this ghost craves," the creature growled. "Oh, yeah. I'll sing a lullaby for you, creature," snarked Barton before he fired off the arrow he had in his hand. To his surprise, the arrow went right through the creature and stuck on a rooftop where the rest of his team was taking cover. Before Barton could warn his team, the arrow exploded, showering his team with blocks of concrete. "What the hell?" Barton cursed before throwing a smoke grenade at the creature. Realizing that his team was down, Barton jumped off the building and fired an arrow on a wire to swing down to the street. As he hoped, the creature also jumped after him. He was quick on his feet and took cover behind a car while he threw an incendiary grenade at the creature. Barton could see the grenade blast barely phased the creature. He switched on the comms quickly. "Sir, I need backup. We lost the bird, and my team is down. I don't think I can slow this thing down with my weapons. It's as if this thing is unkillable." Before Barton could hear any response, he was forced to roll away from the cover of the car as the creature reduced it to a smoldering lump of melted metal. Barton reached for another grenade, but he was forced to roll away as the creature fired off the gun. "Come now, human. Meet your end with dignity. After all, it's rare to meet your end at the hands of the Flying Dutchman." Just as the creature was about to turn Barton into a pile of ash, a camera light flashed, giving pause to the creature. Even Barton, who had just seen his life flash before his eyes, stared incredulously at the blonde-haired woman holding a small camera in her hands. He wouldn't be surprised if the woman were an aspiring journalist. No matter the day and age, there is always an abundance of idiots littering around the world, snarled the creature before aiming its gun at the woman. But before the creature could pull the trigger, a bright red beam of energy punched into it, pushing it back. The skies rumbled, which made Barton look up. There, among the clouds, he could see a dot of light that looked like a star moving down towards them. "Come down from the clouds, servant of God. Come and fight me," the creature roared to the heavens. As if accepting the challenge, the clouds parted, and the light punched through the air straight towards the creature. There was another blast of energy that the creature defended using its metal arm. Barton rolled away, fearing for his life, as the white light smashed into the creature, kicking up clouds of dust. When the dust settled, there was a floating figure right over the creature clad in shiny silver armor. There was a silver spear punching through the creature's chest, pinning it to the ground. Despite being saved from what was most assuredly a grisly death, Barton was on edge when it came to the new arrival. "I've got a flying masked fellow on the scene," he whispered into the comms. "You asked for backup, Agent Barton." "This is the backup," came Coulson's reply. "Oh. That makes sense," he said sarcastically into the comms. Who was he kidding? Nothing made sense anymore. But this was not the time to ponder about the intricacies of his life. So, he took a deep breath and made his mind ready to do what must be done. After that, Barton turned his attention back to the floating figure, who had picked up the gun attached to the creature's hand. "It's some kind of plasma weapon," Barton said, thinking the information might be useful for the floating guy. "I doubt that," said the floating guy, showing Barton the empty chamber of the gun. There was no ammunition in the gun. Then what the hell was this creature firing at him all this time? Ha! Ha ha ha! Barton flinched when he heard the evil laughter from the creature, making him point an arrow at the impaled creature on the ground. The creature stirred and suddenly began to laugh like a maniac. "God, this thing does not die," Barton whispered in horror. "Then you should blame God for my survival. He sends his servant to beat me down, but he won't bother to release me from the grip of the devil. If he truly wishes to rid this world of my existence, he should just do it. Instead, he plays this cruel joke," the creature rambled rapidly. "What's he rambling about?" Barton wondered out loud. As a last-ditch effort, the creature fired off a blast of energy from its eye patch. Barton was about to dodge, but the energy was stopped in its tracks when a dome of bluish shield sprung up around his savior. "Well, that's a neat trick." Barton whistled in appreciation. "You should take cover, Agent Barton. Things are about to get far more troublesome." The masked guy replied in a garbled voice. Barton eyed the pinned creature and shrugged. "This is new for me, but I can manage." "I was not talking about Ghost," said his savior. The ground shook behind Barton, and turning around, he saw the most hideous and demonic creature he had ever seen in his life. "Remember me, homie. I am the baker, and I'm going to bake you all in flames of hell. What the hell is wrong with the world?" Barton wondered as he stared at the sick smile on the horned creature with red skin. "Burn away!" The horned monster roared before a blast of superhot flames poured out of its open mouth. Syrian observed the new arrival. The creature was similar to Ghost, who was pinned down on the ground courtesy of his vibranium spear. The light force energy stored inside the spear should be more than enough to interfere with the creature's power and keep it down. But this new creature was far more powerful. He could see that from the amount of heat contained inside its body. If this thing unleashes its full power, this place will become a melted pool of metal and superheated sand. Syrian thought. There was only one way to counter such a risk. The creature had to be taken out of this place. Preferably to somewhere without any vegetation or intelligent life. A plan quickly formed in his mind as the flames crept closer and closer. Vibrating his eyes in the socket, Syrian was able to amass a greater density of power before shooting it all out in a single blast. The huge concentration of energy managed to blast the baker away while Syrian's suit projected the energy shield that guarded him and Barton from the blast of fire heading their way. He traced the trajectory of Baker and the guy was thankfully gaining elevation from the ground. "Agent Barton. I'll leave Ghost in your capable hands," said Syrian, looking at the archer. "How am I supposed to do that? The guy is shooting fire out of his eyes." "Put him on ice, Agent Barton," said Syrian, before he blasted off into the sky. Syrian quickly caught up with the baker who was tussling, screaming and spitting out fire wildly in midair. Just like last time, he got the feeling that the fire enveloping the guy was too dangerous. "Full armor," he whispered, and the vibranium suit flowed into every nook and cranny of his body. Within seconds he was fully covered in a suit of armor made of the strongest metal on Earth. Pumping out the light force into the suit, he gained altitude and caught the baker on the neck. He squeezed hard, but all he got was a blast of fire to the face. The vibranium suit was not even signed by the flame. Whatever threat the flame holds, it was certainly not having any markable effect on vibranium for some reason. Keeping this in mind, Syrian plunged his metal-covered hand into the chest of the baker. The baker grunted and shouted out threats while wildly flailing around. Syrian paid it no heed and pulled back his hand only to see liquid fire in his hand. "Looking for my heart, homie? I melted that to kill you, bastard," the baker roared out. "Who gave you this power? Give me a name," Syrian inquired, shaking the demonic entity. But all he got was mad cackling and a string of profanities. "This is no use. It's time to put an end to this madness," Syrian thought as he prepared to blast into outer space. The vacuum of space might snuff out the baker's unnatural flames, as ice didn't yield any result with Ghost. However, before Syrian started to ascend to space with the baker, he picked up on two bogies approaching his position. Focusing his vision westward, he picked up on two F-18s steadily making their way towards his position. Then all of a sudden one of the F-18s released a missile while the other began to decelerate. "Fury, you son of a bitch. Put him on ice," he says. "Yeah, easy for you to say," Clint muttered, looking wildly around but seeing only a burning landscape before him. He saw a half-burnt building nearby, and thankfully, an intact fire extinguisher was safely tucked away in the front lobby. Thank God for small mercies, Clint muttered to himself, as he hauled the fire extinguisher towards the trapped demonic entity called Ghost. "Hey there. Eat this, dipshit." With a poof, he unloaded a cylinder full of carbon dioxide into Ghost's face and along the guy's unnatural body. He had no idea whether the extinguisher made any difference, but he just wanted to do it for his peace of mind. Terrorists, psychopathic mercenaries, and the usual Ponzi scheme fellows were more his speed. Dealing with flying aliens and fire-spitting demons was way above his pay grade. Having experienced firsthand how costly and dangerous it was to be in a fight with supernatural beings, Clint decided he was not going to be in another fight like this one. At least not without proper tools. He took stock of his quiver, where his exploding arrows were nearly exhausted. Despite using more firepower than he usually did, he barely put a scratch on Ghost. This alone showed just how outclassed he was in this game. Not to mention the number of men he lost from his team. "Barton. Barton, are you there?" the comms cackled back to life in his ear. "Coulson. I'm here," he replied through the comms. "What's the situation on the ground?" "Trap 1 is pinned down by an alien spear that's glowing strangely. And I have a civilian near me." Barton looked around for the journalist who had been clicking away madly a moment ago with her camera, but she was nowhere to be found. "What civilian?" asked Coulson from the comms. "She seems to have made her exit. Anyway, we have Trap 1 bound. Can you arrange for an airlift? Also, bring a lot of liquid nitrogen," said Clint. "All right. Barton, can you boost your signal? We seem to have lost contact with Vex," Coulson asked. Clint took a cursory look at his equipment before agreeing, as it was mostly intact for the aforementioned purpose. "Okay. Put on your oxygen mask and hold tight. Backup is on the way." Clint frowned at the advice given by Coulson. "Oxygen mask? What for?" asked Clint with some amount of surprise. Sure, there was a lot of fire and smoke billowing out of the buildings, but the air quality was not that low. It was still breathable. "There is a missile headed for Trap 2. It's going to get harder to breathe. You should not be feeling the effects, but better to prepare for the worst and be ready for anything," said Coulson. "All right. Hawkeye, over and out." You did what? Fury shouted, his lone eye bulging out of his socket incredulously. Look, Nick. If I had the choice, I wouldn't have done this, but the council voted, and like it or not, I've got to go along with their decision, said Alexander, trying to pacify his longtime friend. To hell with the council. Why would they sign off on an airstrike when we have a valuable asset handling the situation? Fury thundered. Oh, that's quite simple, Nick. Politics. Seeing the bewildered look on his friend's face, Alexander decided to extrapolate his point. SHIELD is run by the NATO allied nations and some non-aligned nations like China and India. However, the United States is the main backer of SHIELD. The rest of the members don't even spend 1% of their GDP to support SHIELD. So, when the White House wants something done, SHIELD has no choice but to comply. You can't be serious. Are we going to bend over backwards whenever the White House throws a hissy fit? Are we really going to compromise on the world's security over politics? Asked Fury. You should be thanking me, Nick. The president's advisors were adamant about using a nuke. I managed to talk them down to use an oxygen destroyer. The oxygen destroyer. That's classified, and it needs congressional approval for wartime use, and we are not at war. Fury said, aghast at what he was hearing. Pierce only smiled and shook his head. Look around you, Nick. We are scrambling jets, and the Pacific Fleet has been on alert since the incident in Nevada. All our military bases in the Indo-Pacific are on high alert. Congress has surrendered its constitutional duties to the President of the United States. We are at war, said Pierce to a thoroughly stunned Fury. I understand you, Nick. You didn't think the situation would snowball out of your control. Neither of us did. But, the moment demonic beings that look like they have been straight out of hell stepped in and began burning down a city, the game as we know it changed. The president and his advisors want to be seen as the protectors of Christendom. Their politics demands they take action and be seen protecting this country from the devil. There is nothing you or I could do to change their course of action. War has come. Alexander declared. This is wrong. This is madness. Fury muttered. I agree. Alexander muttered softly and squeezed the shoulder of one of his oldest friends in a comforting gesture. Since when has war been anything else? You and I know war should be the last resort, but mankind has always flirted with war ever since we evolved from apes. There is a period of chaos before order is established. Similarly, war comes before peace. Unfortunately, the world has not known peace for a long time. We pretend there is peace, and then something happens, kicking the reality back into our faces. We have no other choice but to face it because the truth is unforgiving. And what is that truth? Asked Fury, with a decent amount of skepticism. Freedom breeds war. So long as humans are free to do as they will, war is inevitable. The human proclivity to chaos will always pit us against each other. Alexander said, trying to make his friend see the truth that has always been there for anyone to see. But Fury shook himself away from Alexander's grasp. I refuse to believe that. I think peace is out there if we manage to keep our vigilance and do our duty. Excuse me, Pierce. I need to warn my asset about what's coming, said Fury before taking his leave. Alexander shook his head and turned away from watching his friend leave to focus on the visuals from Ground Zero. Nothing of this had factored into his plan for Hydra's plans. But HYDRA was nothing but adaptable. They thrived in chaos because they understood what needed to be done. Peace cannot be achieved with one or two sacrifices. The greater the peace, the greater the sacrifice. The life of Steve Rogers should have taught you that, Fury. Hail HYDRA, said Alexander, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. He was curious about Nevada's outcome. Would the missile take out the alien? Or was Vex strong enough to survive the oxygen destroyer? Alexander licked his lips and leaned forward in his seat, eager to get some answers. Vex. Can you hear me? Vex. A familiar voice cackled from the transponder inside his mask, making Syrian frown. Yeah. I can hear you, Director Fury, said Syrian, even as he climbed high into the sky with the baker in his firm grip. There's a missile coming straight at the creature. ETA 2 minutes, Fury warned. I'm tracking it. Tell me, why are you firing a missile when I have it handled? Asked Syrian, not liking having missiles fired upon his person. Rest assured, I had no part in this fiasco. The missile is thermally locked. Leave the creature in the sky and get out of the way, fast, warned Fury. You sound worried. What kind of missile is this? It's not a nuke, is it? Syrian asked worriedly. No, it's not a nuke. But it is just as dangerous. It's an oxygen destroyer. It releases a chemical compound into the air that attacks oxygen in the air. Any carbon-based life form in its vicinity will be wiped off in an instant. Not even bacteria will survive. Leave now. Fury shouted from the other end. Syrian was understandably spooked, especially considering Fury sounded very serious. He was not willing to test out his Kryptonian invulnerability against the missile either. Better to play it safe for now, he thought. Optima analyzed the missile's chemical composition. I want to know everything about its performance, Syrian ordered. As you wish, sir, Optima replied before employing the scanners of Syrian's suit of armor to collect data. Looks like this is where we part ways, Baker, said Syrian before throwing the baker away towards the path of the missile. At least, that was what he intended, but the baker clutched onto his arm like a vulture getting a piece of meat. If you thought I was going quietly into the night, you've got another thing coming, homie. I say we both go with a bang. Ha, 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 the baker shouted before laughing like a madman as the missile closed in on them both. The missile quickly caught up, and Syrian braced himself for the impact. There was a bright flash of light and the sensation of tremendous force hitting him despite being covered in a vibranium suit. He could feel his senses warning him of what was happening. It was as if the oxygen molecules were grinding against each other and disappearing into the infinitesimally small folds of space. He realized what was going on. Oxygen was not getting destroyed by the weapon like Fury explained. Oxygen was being folded into quantum space. He didn't know how he came to this conclusion, but his mind was screaming at him to shield himself, and he did the only thing that came to his mind. Calling forth the light force all around his body, he let go of his tight control over the energy and unleashed the full might of his power. There was light everywhere, and even his senses eluded him. He became blind to all senses, and darkness engulfed him. White light, or the light force, the first light that shone in the dark universe, gave birth to creatures of light. It stabilized the virgin universe and brought balance to the everlasting darkness. Before the white light, there was no concept of day or night. Everything was immersed in darkness, and the vast space of the universe remained dark and cold. But this was not to be. Call it fate or destiny or perhaps the will of a higher power, a crack formed in the vast ocean of space. Through this crack, the light dimension poured out the first light into the dark universe. From this light, the races of light were born. Those who dwelled in darkness were forced to adapt. They had no choice but to accept the light that gave warmth and color to life across the universe. And so began the war. The war between light and darkness. It was a war that brought balance to the universe for a time. When the scales tipped to one side too much, the other reared back, and catastrophe would unfold. The never-ending battle of darkness and light was never supposed to sow chaos in the universe. The intent had always been to balance the intricate powers of the universe so that it could expand faster and for life to spread unopposed to faraway distant star systems. Of course, not everyone agreed with your plan. A voice in the infinity of space rumbled. A tear in space formed and proceeded to split wide open. Eternity stepped out of the tear, which closed behind him. He was the first soul to take birth in the new universe that spawned the multiverse. It was because of his existence that the multiverse exists, and souls could exist in multiple iterations across the multiverse. The large ball of colossal energy made of white light condensed into a humanoid form. Free will grant all life the ability to choose. The precondition for choice is the ability to disagree with me. Eternity hummed while peering intently at the events unfolding on Earth. Why did you bring an alien soul into this verse? If I can feel the distinction, so do the celestials. And you know how your first creation can behave, said Eternity, eyeing the Creator, the one who remains many. Perhaps the other moniker fits better, the one above all. To seek a reason for my actions is a hopeless case. You should know better than that, Eternity. You might as well have asked what is the purpose of life or the existence itself. My actions are beyond the scope of reason. Eternity remained silent and observed the Creator, the one who gave him a purpose in this multiverse. But he could not hold his curiosity back. After all, the presence of the Creator was a cause of concern for him. The Creator was a master at causing mischief in a scale that even boggled his mental faculties. Why are you here? Why now, after all this time? Asked Eternity. Why? Don't you want me here? You are a mischief maker, Creator. You have toyed with the humans of Earth many times in the past. I'd say you are rather obsessive about them. Eternity accused. The Creator just laughed. It was a strange thing for Eternity to watch, the Creator's laugh. Despite his powers, he remained ignorant of the true depth of the Creator. He only knew what he was allowed to know by the Creator. He might be the personification of all living souls in the multiverse, but he was still confined to this singular multiverse. So, watching the source of all the multiverses laughing like a normal living being was indeed disturbing and a rare event. Does humans warrant such attention and interference from the higher planes? They are just souls like every other living being in the multiverse. Eternity thought. I'm here to even the field in this struggle between darkness and light, said the Creator. Eternity looked at the Creator with trepidation. Whenever the Creator became hands-on with the humans of Earth, it always ended in disaster for the people of the planet. If it weren't for the different pantheon of gods, Earth would have been rendered asunder by the Creator's mischief. Then again, the Creator made those gods, so what does he know? You intervened 4 times, and you launched 4 conflicting religions. Are you sure you want to intervene again, Creator? Eternity asked. Don't be so melodramatic, the Creator said, dismissing his concerns. Now then. Let there be light. Eternity looked at the Earth, where the Creator's mischief was directed. He could only see light, and most likely, this was the same for the humans down below. He was about to persuade the Creator to pull back his power, but the Creator was nowhere to be found. Typical. Eternity groaned. He looked at Earth and waited for the bubble of power the Creator bestowed to rescind. As his vision became clear, he also felt the surging of a new power on planet Earth. His senses picked up a familiar warmth surging from the KRYPTONIAN. I see. Eternity murmured, taking in the result of the Creator's will. Slashing his dark hands, he opened a tear in space through which he made his escape. Whatever happened down on Earth was not his responsibility. It never was and never will be. He had better things to do than become part of the Creator's mischief. The tranquility of the free stream water was soothing as he stretched his limbs out. Bending his torso forward while he sat on a mat, he set his arms underneath his slightly raised knees while his legs were stretched out in full. Bruce closed his eyes and took a small breath before he stretched his neck out and started ahead while his body was in the tortoise pose. He took even breaths, and the bright rays of the sun smothered him with warmth. He kept track of his heartbeat, but it was steady and was rather in a calm rhythm. The aim of this pose was not just to stretch the limbs but to control breathing and cut off the senses to the upper torso. With his upper torso now being level with the ground, it helped in focusing the mind inward. The benefits of the daily practice include reduced stress and a flexible body. For someone like him, this was a godsend. A precondition to channel dimensional energy was concentration. Without a focused mind, the constructs made out of dimensional energy tended to be weak. One can only concentrate so much, especially when a raging giant green monster is your alter ego. Such weakness was dangerous for a sorcerer. Not just because of the expectations of the teachers here but also because of the responsibility associated with a sorcerer. It was a new world here in Kamar Taj, and this new world offered him new possibilities but also new responsibilities. Originally, he had come here to tame the Hulk. But now, after tasting the enormity of knowledge in the sanctum, he was hooked. He was interested in going further ahead in this path rather than returning to whatever awaited him back home. Home? Bruce thought amusedly. There was no home waiting for him. His home was hunting him to use what was inside him as a weapon against the world. If there was any regret in him, that'd be for Betty. But, as the Ancient One taught him, attachment to the material was detachment from the spiritual. Abandoning his attachment to Betty, he could see the pain he'd cause her if he remained in her life. The danger he'd put her through would be incalculable. On the other hand, he could do good by working in the sanctum with the Order of the Mystic Arts. Most importantly, should he lose control of the Hulk, the sorcerers of the sanctum could ensure no one gets hurt. It'd be a load off his back, and he could work in a stress-free environment. Truly, he ought to thank Syrian for sending him here. Bruce felt like he was on a new path and opening a new chapter in his life. Granted, it was a life full of ancient magic and dimensional threats. But what was life without some fun? Bruce. Someone repeatedly called his name, breaking him out of the trance. Opening his eyes, he was greeted by the sight of Mordo, Caecilius, and the Ancient One standing before him with an open portal behind them. There has been an incursion by a demonic entity into our world, and your friend Syrian is in trouble. Are you interested in tagging along? Asked the Ancient One. He looked at the Ancient One and then at the other two sorcerers. From their expressions, he deduced that this was no joke and that they were dead serious. Bruce immediately came out of his yoga posture to address his guests. What sort of trouble? Asked Bruce. From what he knew of Syrian, the guy was certainly capable of handling anything. His friend toyed with the Hulk, after all. Who could bring trouble to someone like that? The sort of trouble that requires our attention, said Mordo. Bruce eyed the man who had trained him in hand-to-hand combat. If the Ancient One was pulling out all the big guns, there must be some serious problem. Although Bruce was not exactly sure what he could contribute here. Do you think I'm ready? He asked the Ancient One. No one ever is. We do what we have to do at the most difficult of times. Those who manage to do this lead productive lives. Time waits for no one, not you, not me, not anyone. We make the choices we make and work for the best outcome, said the Ancient One. You could have just said yes, he muttered in his mind as he followed the sorcerers into the portal. Jane watched the events transpiring in Nevada on the TV with a sense of fear and bewilderment. She could handle her boyfriend being an alien, but demons walking around and burning cities and people on live television, especially after Christmas Eve, was where she drew the line. Nothing made sense anymore. Demons were supposedly living beneath the ground, and aliens flew down from the sky. What next? God and Satan were real? That'd take the cake, won't it? Jane thought. The TV anchor, who was chatting away excitedly and explaining how the Angel of Pennsylvania was there to save the day and the happenings on Ground Zero, suddenly paused. We are getting some new information from the White House. Our sources tell us that the president has ordered a missile attack against one of the demons. We don't know which one, but seeing as one is immobile, it is most likely. Oh, wait. There it is. The visuals suddenly shifted to the sky, where a small dot of light was seen arcing through it. It didn't take a genius to identify the little ball of light as a missile. It disappeared briefly among the clouds, and then the whole sky lit up with bright light. What the hell was that? Did they just use a nuke or something? Her dad yelled, standing up from the couch and looking worriedly at the TV. Jane was also equally worried. She was also afraid of a nuclear bomb detonating over a city, but her primary concerns were for her boyfriend. My phone. Jane thought. She searched her pockets, but it was nowhere to be found. She was about to look for the phone in her room, but when she turned around, she screamed in fright. Her father was quickly at her side because of her scream, and the two of them faced a tall, dark-haired man in their drawing room. Isn't it wonderful when a plan works far beyond your expectations? Said the intruder, looking meaningfully at the TV. Who are you? Get the heck out of my house. Her father walked toward the intruder threateningly. The intruder flicked his hand, and a plethora of dark energy swept her father off his feet. He smashed into the TV and lay unconscious on the floor. Everything happened in the blink of an eye, and Jane was left gaping for a time. Dad! Jane cried. Coming out of the shock, she rushed to her father's side. I'm sure your father will be fine, child. You, on the other hand, I can't say, said the intruder, grinning evilly from ear to ear. What do you want? She asked, now very scared, knowing this was possibly an alien or a demon. Why, you, of course, said the intruder, reaching out his gloved hand towards her only for a red chain to wrap around the man's hand. I don't think that's happening, Mephistopheles. Jane was left gaping at the newcomers in her home. There was a bald woman in bright golden robes and 3 men standing by her side with boiled leather armor and long robes. They looked like they were out of the Renaissance fair. The woman was holding the chain in her hand and pulled her father's attacker towards her with unholy strength. Suddenly, one of the men beside the bald woman grew into a familiar giant green monster and gave a full power punch at her would-be attacker. Her attacker was blown away, smashing through the walls and leaving a man-sized hole in the direction of her house's backyard. Jane gaped at the hold on her wall for a full minute. Wow! Jane voiced. Thanks, the green giant spoke, an abashed look on his face. Hi. I'm Bruce Banner. I'm a friend of Syrian. Jane dumbly shook the green giant's hand. This was all too much for her, and everything was happening way too fast for her to process. Who are you people? Who's that guy? What happened to Syrian? Enough chit-chat. This fight is just beginning, snapped Caecilius. 2 energy shields sprung up on his hands, and he proceeded to combine them and expand them. Not a minute later, a torrent of black fire attacked the shield, forcing the other sorcerers to also pool their power to strengthen the shield. Jane watched all of this with a completely lost look on her face and an unconscious father to care for. What's going on? She wondered, even as she ducked and covered her father with her own body as the house started to collapse around her. Bruce had undergone extensive training at the sanctum under the direct tutelage of the Ancient One. Whatever she deemed necessary, he learned. He also had to learn a whole new language from scratch to make sense of the immense wealth of knowledge in KRYPTONIan. It was still a work in progress, but he did have some significant improvement on his learning curve, considering the complexity of the Sanskrit language. There were too many synonyms for a word, each with different meanings in different contexts. This was the reason why the books of KRYPTONIan were never translated into other languages. The context behind the formulation of the spells would be lost in translation. This made it harder for students to pick up the spells, as the mastery of spells depended entirely on the mastery of Sanskrit and even some obscure lost languages. This was why Bruce immediately jumped back and let the three other masters erect the magical defenses as the harmless old man turned into a devilish creature with big-ass horns and red skin dripping lava. Looking into the fiery red eyes of the devil, Bruce gulped in fear. He could feel the other guy clawing at the back of his mind to come out. The Hulk, for whatever reason, found this devilish creature an affront. But unleashing the Hulk would be counterproductive. Once unleashed, he feared the Hulk wouldn't differentiate between a friend and foe. Guys. I'll just hang back here. Bruce tentatively whispered as the devil let out a cruel laugh before spawning a sea of black fire in their direction. Masters Caecilius and Mordo were quick to strengthen their shields. A tidal wave of black fire crashed into the magical shields, grinding against them. The terrifying thing was that the fire was accompanied by the tortured screams of souls. Finally attuned to the magic as he was, Bruce could see the eternal torment the souls trapped in the black fire were going through. In fact, he could see the souls were being drained of their energy to fuel the fire. Dr. Banner. Guard the woman. Master Caecilius shouted before the man went through a series of hand seals summoning small discs of energy. Caecilius then released the discs through the magical barrier the Ancient One and Mordo were holding. The discs expanded into giant vortexes which began to suck in the black flames. As the dark vortexes sucked in the flames, the tears in space induced violent thunderstorms to gather in the sky. Are those miniaturized singularities? Jane asked in wonder. I don't think this is the time for finding that out, said Bruce, taking Jane's father into his giant arms. We should move to somewhere safe. Yeah. You're right. Who are you again? Asked Jane, both of them running towards the car. I'm Bruce Banner. I'm a friend of. He didn't get to complete the sentence as the ground exploded beneath him. Bruce was thrown away from the force, but he managed to land on his feet. Thankfully, Jane's father was also safe in his arms. But Jane, on the other hand, was not at all safe. Oh, no. Bruce muttered in horror. There was a black pointy tail piercing through Jane's heart from beneath the ground. Bruce immediately set Jane's father down and rushed towards Jane. A spiraling disk of energy cut through the air and sliced at the dark tail, piercing through Jane's heart. Bruce was able to quickly catch Jane, but she was spasming wildly as a black tar-like substance began to spread through her body. He could see the black substance turning Jane's veins black. The Ancient One was also by his side, quickly using her magic to isolate the black substance. What is this thing? It is behaving like an infectious disease, said Bruce, watching the black tar-like substance lash out at the Ancient One's attempts to isolate it. Evil, Bruce. This is evil, said the Ancient One, looking far too serious for his liking. However, he couldn't ask the Ancient One to clarify because the ground around them rumbled violently. The earth was upturned as demonic creatures and skeletons began to rise from the ground. Bruce, can you buy me some time? Ancient One asked, pouring magic into Jane to keep the infectious energy from spreading. Gladly, he growled, before letting Hulk take over after turning towards the demonic creatures. "Don't harm my friends. I'm trusting you here." That was the final thought that crossed Bruce's mind before the Hulk took over. A roar of challenge was let out before Hulk trampled into the midst of the undead army, crushing bones to fine dust in a single punch. Coulson was tired, and he was obviously going to end up holding the fort on the ground for a bit more time. All around him, there was only destruction. His team was 100 strong when the incident took place, and now their numbers were barely 50. It was a total wipeout when it came to the soldiers employed by the army. Very few survived the onslaught of the demon. The less talked about the civilians, the better. During the first wave of attack, the army had thrown everything at the demon and it proved to be a hindrance to proper evacuation. He was sure there were quite a lot of people left stuck in the rubble. He prayed they'd survive, but he was not that confident. There was a reason this missile was kept classified and never used even in the most desperate situations. It was only after the failed Kree invasion that the protocols to defend the planet were updated. He was not exactly kept in the loop of what those changes were, but apparently, the use of highly classified weapons on US soil was one of them. An attack of this scale had never happened on US soil. To think the people in Washington would use a dangerous weapon on US soil didn't sit well with him. Especially considering S.H.I.E.L.D. had an asset on the field. The bright explosion high in the sky was not at the level of a thermonuclear explosion, but it was nearly there. "Coulson, do you copy?" Fury's voice cackled through the comms. Without taking his eyes off the sky, he pressed the comms. "I copy. Do you have eyes on the target?" Fury asked. "Negative, sir. We have lost SAT visuals, Coulson. Can you see anything?" "Sir, the sky is glowing. It's like the whole sky is burning with something," said Coulson. "The air might be ionizing." "Check the radiation levels," Fury ordered. "Nothing out of the ordinary, sir." "I checked." "Then what the hell is going on? Somebody give me something. I need to know whether the threat is neutralized and I also need to know what happened to Vex." Coulson frowned as he noticed something in the sky. "Director Fury, we have a visual," he spoke into the comms. "What do you see, Coulson?" Fury asked hurriedly. "Wings." "What?" Fury sounded incredulous, a sentiment Coulson paralleled. "You'll have to see this to believe, sir," said Coulson, sending the video feed of what he was seeing to the S.H.I.E.L.D. HQ. The energy surging through his body was ever-present but also calm. Unlike the many times he had been forced to suppress the energy, this time, it felt like the chaos was settled, controlled even. Sirian eyed his arms, where the silvery wisps of energy lingered. It felt like a flowing stream full of warmth to his senses. A cocoon of energy also wrapped around him, hugging close to his body. It was as if the energy was protecting him. He reached out with his right hand and touched the silver energy covering him. The moment he touched the energy, it retreated to his back. It was then that he got a clear picture of what was happening. The energy didn't retreat as he thought. Instead, it coalesced into his back to form two wings made of pure starlight. He blinked a few times, but the wings remained attached to his shoulder blades. "Okay, this is weird," Sirian mumbled. "Optima, how come I have wings growing out of my back?" he asked his trusted AI. "I'll need detailed scans and run diagnostics on your genome to come to a proper conclusion, sir," Optical reported. "Is there anything you can tell me now?" "Only that you seem to be overflowing with unknown energy. The light force seems to be augmented by the new energy of an unknown source," said Optima. "Strange," Sirian thought. Suddenly, his eyesight changed, and his senses were flipped. He saw the world in only black and white. His enhanced eyesight immediately zeroed in on the ground where humans dwelled. He could see people down the street, but he perceived them as dark and light wisps of energy. Whatever was happening to him was beyond his control, as he could not change his vision back to normal. He was left holding his head in his hands as his senses went haywire. Suddenly, an upsurge in dark energy caught his attention. It was coming from further east, and the location made his eyes widen. For whatever reason, his hold over the senses returned, and what he found made him act fast. He made his way to the east coast as fast as possible, easily breaching the sound barrier. He was sure S.H.I.E.L.D. could take care of the situation on the ground. As he speared through the sky, he was not ignorant of the effect he was having on the surroundings. There seems to be a sizable storm of energy trailing behind him. For whatever reason, the energy seems to be lingering in the air, just like those insufferable wings on his back. No matter what he tried, it was not folding back or just powering down. In the end, he had to ignore the wings for the time being. As he neared the destination, he could immediately feel a stark change. The air was suffused with a potent malefic energy that seemed to reject his existence itself. He finally found himself near Jane's house, or at least what remained of Jane's house. Landing on the ground, he expunged the excess energy bubbling within him in a wide arc, wiping out the shadows and bony creatures in the blink of an eye. For a moment, the air stilled as Syrian took in the carnage. He could see Jane on the ground with a faint heartbeat that was held upright thanks to the Ancient One's skill. The Hulk was surrounded by demonic creatures, but they were getting smashed left and right. The force behind Hulk's punches and smashes seems to be thinning the numbers of these creatures. Nonetheless, Syrian didn't want these creatures to linger any longer. A blast of concentrated white energy blasted out of his eyes, cutting down the creatures en masse. Strangely enough, he couldn't feel anything from Jane's father. There was no heartbeat he could hear from the downed man. "How do you like the grand welcome I've prepared for you? I hope this is to your liking." Syrian rounded on the creature that uttered those words. His vision cleared as he cut off the energy to his eyes. His senses kicked in and he could see the vilest malevolent form of dark energy clinging to the creature. The sheer wrongness radiating from the creature was unbelievable. Every instinct in his body told him to destroy the creature. This creature was a perversion of life, an enemy of life, and had no right to be in the warm cradle of light that facilitates life. This thing was the end of all civilizations. It was unnatural, and it was not even death, the balancer of life. You are a blight to all life. You are a blight to all souls." Syrian didn't know where the words came from, but he believed them all the same. He could feel the urge to strike this creature down. The unnaturalness radiating from this creature was so great that it was affecting his grip on his emotions. It was almost like raw instinct ingrained deep in his bones. Combined with the anger he felt on behalf of Jane and her father, this made Syrian act rather than talk. What happened next was purely on instinct. His wings pulsed with blue light, and the next thing he knew, he was firing off what amounts to small bolts of energy. The creature let out a crazed laugh as it conjured a veil of darkness. Some of the energy bolts punched through and struck the creature, injuring it. But its injuries only made it laugh harder. "Oh, yes. I've forgotten what pain feels like. Although, I must say I miss the old names," the creature shouted with a crazed frenzy palpable in its voice. "Aren't you going to use my old names? Your kind oh so love to give me names. Beelzebub, Apollyon, Archfiend, Demon, Lucifer. You talk too much." Syrian's lips curled into a sneer. He was right upon the creature, floating right over its head. Having a clear shot, twin beams of concentrated energy blasted out of his eyes, spearing into the creature. The blast of energy was far too close for the creature to avoid, and Syrian's speed was totally unmatched. Caught completely off guard, Mephisto had no room to dodge. He took the full brunt of the energy blast straight on the head. Raya. Syrian pressed on with the attack, increasing the density of the energy beam. The pure light managed to burn the flesh of Mephisto with increasing intensity, but it was not cutting through fast enough. A black tail jumped towards him as if to pierce his heart. To his eyes, the tail was traveling at a snail's pace. He caught the tail in a vice grip and he promptly sliced it off using a blade his vibranium suit conveniently provided. The intensity of the creature's painful scream picked up a notch as its tail was cut in half. The wings on his back covered the creature and began to emit white flames. He didn't know how, but somehow, he knew that his wings were useful in this fight. The flames coalesced around the creature and began to burn away its red skin. Layer by layer, the creature lost its skin. Syrian let out a bellow of rage as he released as much energy as he possibly could muster and flew back a safe distance, drained to do anything else. The rest he left in the capable hands of the sorcerers of Kamar Taj. They were already creating barriers around the creature, and the Ancient One was summoning some sort of portal. Believing that they were far more knowledgeable in the mystical side of things, he floated towards Jane, who looked normal from the outside. But, with a single look with his augmented sight, he could see she was far from being okay. There was a dark parasitic energy coiling around her spine. Gathering a sliver of energy augmented by the white light into his fingertips, Syrian reached out towards Jane to expunge the foreign dark energy. No! The Ancient One stopped him halfway by raising a small barrier between him and Jane. Your energy will simply annihilate her as it battles the dark power within. We need to heal her some other way. She can barely hold the current energy. Her body will simply break down as her vitality is not strong enough, said the Ancient One. Can you get this thing out of her? He asked, terminating the energy gathered. I can try, but her body needs to be augmented with more energy. I need time to isolate the dark energy and safely pull it out. Syrian looked between the rapidly paling face of Jane and the unmoving body of her father. He had promised himself that he'd never use the procedure on a human unwillingly, but he was left with no choice. I can augment her body at the city. The life support systems randomly flared up in warning whenever Jane's physical faculties plunged. 24 hours passed after Jane suffered a critical injury. So far, she remained unable to recover from the wound despite Syrian's best efforts. He would have used the light force to heal Jane, but he was dissuaded by the Ancient One. You must be patient, Syrian. If Mephisto wanted her dead, she would have died already. He was expecting you'd use your power to heal her and use her as a conduit to corrupt you. Ancient One advised. Syrian just nodded, having already been explained this fact, but that doesn't mean it makes it any easier to watch Jane suffer. The Ancient One extended her help by offering many of the foremost healers of her order. They had already made 6 attempts to cleanse the dark taint that infested Jane's body. The only reason she held on so far was that he was artificially augmenting her using Vita rays and a mild super soldier serum, which could last for 2 hours at best. Her body can't take it anymore. The serum can only give her temporary respite to whatever it is you people are doing. Syrian said, knowing the toll on Jane's body was just about to cross a point of no return. Please understand, we are dealing with an entity that predates humanity itself. There are difficulties involved in purging the influence of an ancient being like Mephisto. I understand. If you can't pull out the infectious dark energy surging within her, then I'll be forced to stop injecting her with any more of the serum. Jane is barely shielded from the consequences of repeated exposure to the serum, said Bruce, who was also helping out with the process. Might I suggest that you gentlemen find a way to make the effects of the serum on her body permanent, said Ancient One, a placid smile on her face before she went ahead to converse with her colleagues from the sanctums around the world. Is that possible? Bruce asked, looking curiously at Syrian. Syrian looked towards the cryopod on the other side of the wall of his lab, where Steve Rogers was sleeping soundly, unaware of the outside world. He had not attempted to develop a permanent super soldier serum from the sleeping captain because he never thought it'd come in handy in the future. Even the serum he developed was more out of scientific curiosity. He was planning to use the serum in an experiment to see how it behaved with the animal species and perhaps the DNA of a Kryptonian. After all, Professor Erskine developed the super soldier serum for humans. Syrian wanted to see whether he could modify the original serum and thereby impart significant changes to the animal kingdom. His interests were purely academic, but now. He looked at Jane's prone form in his lab and then at the sleeping Steve Rogers. It's possible, Syrian admitted, looking at Bruce. But it'll be difficult. There can't be any mistake in the formula, and it has to be specifically designed for Jane and no one else. Why's that? Bruce asked, intrigued. Syrian took a moment to think about whether he should confide in Bruce about the Kree's secret experiments and how their experiments left a mark on the human genome. Letting out a sigh, he led Bruce out of his lab to the cryo chamber. Come, let me explain. I still can't believe aliens experimented on early humans and created a subspecies. What are they called again? Inhumans, Syrian answered for the umpteenth time. Why would they call themselves that? Do they have a death wish or something? Asked Bruce. Frankly, I have no idea. Syrian shrugged. Syrian also thought the term disadvantageous, but he didn't make up the name. So, he felt he was not in the wrong to use the name already in use by the branch species within humanity. Do you think I had latent inhuman genes? Bruce asked as they worked on the serum. I don't think so. Your case is unique in that aspect. You seem to have regular human genes, but they behave, oddly, said Syrian. Bruce snorted. That seems to be an understatement. Also, where did you find Captain America? That was a complete coincidence. I was scanning the planet for more vibranium deposits when I came across the wreckage of an old aircraft in the North Atlantic close to Greenland. My scanners picked up the captain's shield, and when I found it, I found him trapped in ice in suspended animation. I still can't believe he's alive after all these years or why you have kept him in cryo sleep. Bruce said. Syrian could feel a hint of disapproval coming from his friend. Trust me, I thought of waking the man, but Syrian was cut off as the particle accelerator finished working on the new serum. Sir, the new super soldier serum has been synthesized. I also took the liberty of running some tests. It is 97% compatible with Miss Foster's DNA, said Optima. That's wonderful news. Bruce said happily, looking at Syrian, who was also quite satisfied with the news. However, there's an unforeseen development. Optima added, cutting their celebration short. What's it? Syrian asked. His trusted AI provided Jane's present genetic makeup and projected changes once the serum ran its course. I'm afraid Miss Jane's latent inhuman genes will get triggered once the serum is used on her, sir, said Optima. You mean she'll immediately undergo terrigenesis? Syrian asked incredulously as he found that odd. Terrigenesis was not supposed to commence without certain nuances in the play. He had extensively studied the process from the Kree archives. His research has so far revealed that it was nigh impossible for the inhuman genes to mutate without the aid of terrigen mists. How is that even possible? Without the terrigen mists, the inhuman genome cannot get activated, he mused aloud. But these are not ideal conditions, sir. The dark energy surging within Miss Jane has shifted the parameters drastically. Even now, her inhuman potential is only several steps away from being unleashed, said Optima. So, by using this serum on Jane, she'll unlock her inhuman potential? What does that imply? What kind of mutation can we expect? Asked Bruce, keeping a close eye on the projected anomalies in Jane Foster's genome. I'm afraid my prediction models are woefully inadequate, Dr. Banner. I only have the KRY archives to use as the source for any model projections, and they all have the Terrigen mists involved. Optima claimed, projecting files after files translated from the KRY archives about the subjects who have undergone terrigenesis. Sirian turned away from the data presented by Optima while Bruce went about cursory examining the details, which were admittedly gorier than he realized. So, we'll be entering the realm of unpredictability if we are to use the new serum on Jane. Sirian commented. I'm afraid so, sir, said Optima. What do you plan to do? Bruce asked. It seems we have no choice. Sirian said, making his decision known. Bruce nodded, and together, they made the necessary preparations for the procedure. Half an hour later, they were back in the lab, placing Jane into a modified cryopod. Activate the discharge electrodes. Sirian ordered. 2 silver-colored cylindrical objects were placed on either side of Jane's head. As the electrodes were powered up, the nanoparticles on the electrode became excited and proceeded to melt like ice. The fluid state of the nanoparticles allowed them to cover the entirety of Jane's body like a second skin. Initiate the serum, Sirian ordered once Optima showed him how perfectly the nanoparticles settled on Jane's skin. Several needles were drilled into Jane's body to inject the serum. Once the serum was introduced into Jane's muscles, the needles withdrew, and she was treated with increasing intensity of Vita rays. The nanoparticles snugly clinging to Jane's skin acted as a conduit to concentrate and discharge the Vita rays uniformly across her body. Despite all that happened, Jane remained unresponsive. Increase the output. Sirian ordered. As Optima increased the intensity of the Vita rays, he saw Jane's eyelids move. He kept Jane under observation as the intensity climbed higher and higher until her heart rate began to elevate, approaching dangerous levels. As the Vita rays reached the optimum threshold, the security features kicked in and cut off the radiation automatically. The cryopod powered down while Jane shook with small tremors. Extract a blood sample and... Sirian trailed off as Jane's skin suddenly turned pitch black. What's happening? Bruce asked, alarmed at what he was seeing. Calm down, Dr. Banner. Miss Jane's vitals are all normal. The infliction you see on her skin is terrigenesis running its course, said Optima. There was a bright flash of light and an explosion of a wave of energy. The cryopod exploded outwards. Sirian was quick to shield Bruce from the debris by smacking away the door of the pod that came straight for the good doctor. Thanks. Bruce said, feeling a rush of relief flooding his mind as he managed to avoid transforming into the Hulk on instinct. Sirian patted the man on the shoulder before rushing in to check on Jane. He needn't have worried as she was safely inside the cryopod, awake and whole. Sirian. What happened? Jane looked around in bewilderment. Where am I? I'll explain everything, he said, taking her hands in his and pressing a tentative kiss on her forehead. It has become abundantly clear that God is on our side. This country is the bastion of freedom, liberty, and justice as envisioned by our founders. Whenever the world was in peril, we stepped in to set the world right. I believe this is the God-given duty for which God has created this nation. So, I ask my fellow Americans to step up to battle this evil wherever they may hide. Fury switched off the television. He didn't need to hear more bullshit from the president. War in the Middle East was now all but a reality. Congress was in a tussle over which nation they should go to war with after the events of 9/11. They had yet to reach a consensus, so the president was now stepping in. With the pressure from the White House, especially after the events in Nevada, the destination was now clear. They were going to war with the Saudis. The global ramifications of this decision were already evident. The president announced a wide variety of sanctions on the Desert Kingdom. Its assets were also frozen, which means all oil purchases from the Saudis were suspended. The coming days were only going to get further chaotic as sides were taken in this coming war. The U.S. military bases in the area were the first to be warned and to take defensive positions, which he knew in advance. He knew it was going to be a disaster, but there was not much he could do to avoid the war. The Nevada incident solidified the pro-war faction in Congress, not to mention that public opinion was overwhelmingly in favor of the war. The American public wanted an enemy, and the White House gave them one. Now, how that'd play out in the coming days on the ground would be interesting. At least, the White House held back on issuing the declaration of war until the New Year celebrations were over. It was one last day of normalcy before the world faced the fires of war. Diplomats were still at work to keep the war contained in the Middle East. The last thing they needed was for the war to spin out of control and involve too many players. He saw Coulson approach his office, so he gestured for the man to come in. "Sir, the prisoner is secured, although he is not cooperating with our interrogators," said Coulson, handing over a file to the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. "I'm not surprised. This thing is not exactly a human entity, so difficulties are to be expected." Fury commented, thinking about their prisoner from the Nevada incident. "He's back in ice, I hope." "Yes, sir." There was no other alternative save for employing nitrogen on the prisoner. "But we are keeping that option as a failsafe," Coulson reported. Keep me informed if there are any developments. A Security Council meeting is coming up, and I'd like to present them with some facts rather than a Bible session," said Fury. "I understand, sir. I've asked Hill to contact Vex. He should know more about our prisoner." Fury nodded before turning away from Coulson. Looking outside his office, everything seemed so peaceful. But appearances can be deceiving. Today was the funeral, was it not? Fury asked. "Yes, sir. Another causality of the Nevada incident, but far more removed from the place." It troubled him that there was another player behind these two demonic figures. This player preferred to strike from the shadows despite having great power, as demonstrated in the Nevada incident. Now, that is an enemy he truly feared. The only piece of good news was that Vex seemed to have handled it, though not permanently. So, this Mephisto can be expected to strike again, another enemy he ought to keep his eye on. But exactly how was he supposed to keep an eye on something that was beyond his perception? He was more than aware of his shortcomings. S.H.I.E.L.D. was woefully unprepared to face the challenges and enemies arrayed against them. He had known this from the start. That's why he has been preparing the groundwork for the Avengers Initiative. Did Hill attend? Fury asked. Of course, sir. Agent Hill has been Vex's handler. So, I felt it prudent that she attends the funeral and extend our condolences to Miss Foster," said Coulson. Fury nodded in approval. "Good. We need better relations with Vex moving forward. Keep Hill close to Vex but not too close. This incident has proven that he has not been entirely forthcoming." "Of course, sir." "You don't believe Vex made up the whole story about his planet getting destroyed, do you?" asked Coulson. "I don't believe in anything, Coulson. I cannot afford to. I deal only with facts, and I see few facts when it comes to our alien guest." Fury sighed. "Keep me posted if anything comes up." "Sir." Coulson left the office knowing he was being dismissed. Fury shook his head, tearing his eye away from the scenery outside. A veil had been lifted from the world, revealing a full front view of what was hiding in the shadows. He didn't know whether angels and demons were real, nor did he think they were irrelevant. To a lot of people, the revelations in Nevada became very relevant, which means he had to take them seriously as well. There was even a huge chunk of the American public who thought they had been saved by an archangel of God. There will be ramifications going forward. He knew one thing for sure. The world will never be the same again. Volume 2, Ethereum. December 2002. The world was never the same again. It was a cheesy line, but Syrian knows it aptly described the world at the present. Ever since the war in the Middle East was launched, the world has been turned upside down for the average citizen. Syrian snorted. Who was he kidding? Everyone felt the same way. There was no average person feeling sorry for himself. The initial months of the war were the worst as fuel prices shot up like a rocket climbing into the upper atmosphere. Once fuel prices went up, everything else became super expensive: food, medicine, electricity, water, rent, and interest rates all skyrocketed. This squeezed the average household savings and blew a massive dent in the middle class of almost all nations. Of course, like all events in life, there was a flip side to all the suffering. The oil companies made a killing in the international market. Oil-rich nations of the world made the most of the opportunity. In the US alone, the major oil corporations were making a killing out of the fossil fuel business, and even after the official end of the war, they were making a killing. He couldn't really complain, considering the first thing he did after the 9/11 attack was to up his stock purchases in the fossil fuel industry. He was not above using the situation to his advantage because he had a considerable hand in the whole war. While he was not directly involved in the fighting, he had shamelessly profited from it. He supposed he was a full-blown war-profiteering capitalist asshole. In his past life, he had his fair share of socialist moments where he found all sorts of reasons to blame capitalists who profited from war and diseases. But now, he was a shameless hypocrite who enjoyed the fruits of everything he considered immoral in the past. While he didn't own the bullets or the missiles in the war, he helped design quite a few of them with his new tie-up with Hammer Industries. Justin Hammer was now over the moon with all the lucrative defense contracts coming his way. Their tie-up was somewhat tricky to pull off, considering Vex Corp was also involved in some forms of defense contracts with the military. But Syrian had been careful to engage in contracts not competing with Hammer Industries. He did that by focusing more on increasing the defensive capabilities of the Army, Navy, and Air Force rather than selling them guns and missiles. He left the guns and missiles in the hands of Hammer even though Syrian had Optima go through much design rejigging for the weapons Hammer Industries put in the field. Most of their stuff was utter garbage and a danger to the user more than anyone else. Therefore, it required some rejigging to get most of Hammer's weapons to function as intended. It was an unusual tie-up, considering the nature of their cooperation. But from Syrian's perspective, the tie-up with Hammer Industries kept his hands clean in public. After all, he was indirectly arming the bloated US military with even more powerful guns and missiles while making a shit ton of money. It was blood money, and that kind of money brought a lot of PR problems to the other companies he owned and co-owned. Therefore, his cooperation with Hammer Industries remained airtight under a vast amount of paperwork and contracts. At the same time, their tie-up was publicized in the form of tech support, mainly software and cybersecurity. Cyber warfare was a legitimate battlefield acknowledged by all major nations. The same could be said for major corporations, especially with major contracts with the military-industrial complex that props up the NATO alliance. Under that guise in public, Syrian could float the tie-up with Hammer Industries before the people and his investors without too much scrutiny. Of course, those who looked closely would see a deeper connection. But that was not something Syrian had to worry about anytime soon. For now, he had his bases covered. That was why he could sit back and relax with his buddy Justin Hammer as they showed off the new toy to the observers from the military. Don't you think it's a little early to celebrate? Syrian asked with a raised eyebrow. accepting the champagne poured by Hammer's butler while sitting in the observatory with big-ass screens showing live video feed of the demonstration. Who am I kidding? This is a done deal, you know it better than me, Syrian. So, let's celebrate. Justin said giddily, savoring the taste of champagne as he drained the glass. I suppose you're right. Syrian grinned at his business partner. So, you'll be making a killing from this contract. This calls for a proper celebration. Prepared to be dazzled, my friend. I'll be smothering you with a party that'll make even the angels of heaven jealous. Justin boasted, grinning from ear to ear while positively thrumming with excitement in his seat. Syrian merely shot the man a grin while taking small sips of the champagne. Hammer was a likable character despite several of his oddities. The man went out of his way to be happy all the time. And Hammer had some unhealthy obsession with Tony Stark, which worked in Syrian's favor. It was now no secret that Syrian's meeting had gone south with Tony Stark. He made it known through third parties to attract the right crowd, and his ploy worked like a charm. There were a gazillion people in the world with a hefty bank account and a bone to pick with Tony Stark. So, he found no shortage of friends and investors over their common enmity against the CEO of Stark Industries. Even if Syrian was disappointed Tony rejected his offer to collaborate, he transformed the rejection by Stark into an opportunity. His focus inadvertently fell on the screens where the USAF officers worked on their Predator drone. Well, it looks like the boys are ready downstairs. It's time to dazzle these old generals, said Justin, patting him on the shoulder before walking towards the center stage. Good luck, Syrian whispered to Justin Hammer, leaning against the seat while observing the show. Welcome, everyone. So, I promised everyone here a good show and won't disappoint you with a long speech. Today, I'd like to introduce you to a weapon system I call Sun Spear. It's uniquely designed to tackle multiple threats in the sky utilizing hypersonic missiles paired with advanced radars and EWS. Two birds with one stone is what we're going for here. Now, without further ado, let me introduce you to Sun Spear, the spear tip of advanced weaponry in our skies. Justin gave the go-ahead signal. Please direct your attention to the UAV on the screen. It carries a Mach 2 missile. For demonstration purposes, the UAV, the missile and a surface hangar are the target of Sun Spear. The Predator drone quickly took to the sky with a single missile armed in its arsenal. Another screen came to life, showing another crew standing in a desert with a missile system nearby. Target acquired. Sun Spear engaging. The huge console carrying the missile system aligned itself at an angle before a missile was fired. Live images, as well as projected models of the missile's flight path, were shown on the screen. Our advanced radar systems can pick out targets even from great heights, and shortly, you'll see the speed as well. Justin explained. The missile closed in on the Predator drone quickly, easily crossing Mach 5 speed, and then 5 small miniature missiles escaped from a small compartment on the missile. They quickly formed a perfect circle before falling into a spiral maneuver that made it impossible for the UAV pilot to pull the Predator out of harm's way. At the same time, the Predator launched its Mach 2 missile. The miniature missiles of Sun Spear blew the Predator drone out of the sky. But it didn't end there. The main missile continued to follow the Mach 2 missile launched by the UAV. Suddenly, a panel opened up on the missile and launched another 5 miniature missiles. They executed the spiral maneuver before destroying the Mach 2 missile. However, the show didn't end there. The main missile turned on its own and struck a surface target using satellite targeting. Well, there was a correction to my earlier statement. I meant to say 3 birds with one stone, not 2. Justin cheekily added. Following the demonstration, there was a tech briefing for the military observers. Sun Spear is a perfect weapon system to keep the sky clean of enemy aircraft and rockets. It was also capable of being repurposed as an air-to-surface missile with some modifications. As Justin said, there was no doubt whether the military would purchase the weapon system. With the war in the Middle East turning into a quagmire and expanding into neighboring states of Saudi Arabia, the military was looking for an edge. Sunspear promised to deliver that edge against the proactive players in the Middle East like Iran, Iraq, Qatar, etc. However, selling powerful weaponry and making billions was not the sole goal in Syrian's focus. The money he made from the defense contracts had been poured into his new company that was preparing to launch in a few months, as well as the clean energy project. It would take a few more weeks for everything to settle in before he could officially announce the company. But he was in no hurry. He had 2 models of clean energy vehicles in hand to showcase to the whole world. But starting today and the next 2 weeks, he made it a point to clear his otherwise busy schedule. After 6 hours of flight and an hour of driving through the moderate traffic of Virginia, Syrian arrived at his destination. The family home of Foster's had undergone some modifications. Who am I kidding? The whole thing got rebuilt from scratch. Syrian mused. Parking the car on the side of the driveway, he picked up the luggage and approached Jane's house. Before he reached the front door, Jane appeared by the door, holding it open for him. "You came." Jane breathed, throwing her arms around his neck before he could set the luggage down. "Of course I did. Jacob would feel better if we spent Christmas together and went to visit him." Syrian pressed a kiss on the side of her head. They spent most of the day preparing for Christmas, which involved a grand shopping spree to stock up the kitchen, decorate the house with lights, cut up a proper Christmas tree and turn it into a place to hold many colorful baubles with figurines of little angels. There was also a lot of cleaning up to do, as well as the house had gone unused, with Jane spending almost all her time in Culver. While they ate lunch from a restaurant while shopping, dinner was prepared by Jane's own hands. His attempts to help in the kitchen were thwarted, and he was assigned the boring dish-cleaning duty for his troubles. When the table was set, Syrian had nothing to complain about as he ate the most hearty steak with mashed potatoes and a side of crispy broccoli. Then there was his favorite eggnog with a pint of alcohol to spice things up. "It's so delicious," Syrian said, chewing down a slice of steak, followed by enjoying some broccoli. "Thanks. I've been taking cooking lessons from the net after I got tired of takeouts," said Jane. "You never told me this," Syrian said in surprise. "Only because I didn't want you to stop cooking me whenever you visited." Jane chuckled, looking at the affronted look on his face. "Speaking of which, weren't you supposed to be busy with that expo next month?" Jane asked. "I don't need to be fussing over all the details. Like most leaders, I delegate. That's what a good leader does." Syrian put on a pompous air that cajoled a giggle out of Jane. "You mean you dumped all the work on some poor guy's head who was supposed to enjoy Christmas," said Jane, with a raised eyebrow. "Meh. They'll get over it when they get the paycheck and spend all of it in a nightclub overnight." Syrian shrugged. "Surely, you're joking." Jane scoffed. "I call it Californication. Spend too much time in one of the big 3, you become bluer than the Circassian Sea." Syrian joked. "Do I need to worry about you undergoing this Californication?" Jane asked with a raised eyebrow. "Hello. Outer space alien here." Syrian waved and pointed to himself. "No one is turning me red or blue. If I can make you wear a Christmas cap, anything is possible." Jane said confidently, to which he had no comeback. "I see. Then let me show you what I'm capable of, Earthling." Syrian raised his fork in a threatening manner. Syrian stared at the headstone that carried the name Jacob Foster. It was right next to the headstone of Jane's mother, Christine Foster. He set a bouquet of flowers on each grave while Jane knelt before the graves of her parents with her eyes closed in prayer. He liked the peaceful ambience of the Lutheran church in Fishersville. The cemetery was surrounded by a meadow with an occasional willow tree in between, giving some ample shade. It was a peaceful day with less snow than usual in Virginia in December. He was hardly complaining, as the roads were less slippery, and there was no cyclone blowing all the joy of Christmas out of the window, which was a godsend in a place like Virginia. He was brought out of his inane musings when Jane climbed to her feet while rubbing the corners of her eyes. "Hey." Syrian wrapped his arm around Jane's shoulder. "I'm okay." Jane muttered, shooting hesitant looks at the church across from the cemetery. "You want to go to the church?" Syrian asked softly. "My mom used to bring me here when I was a child," said Jane. "Let's pay the church a visit then," said Syrian, leading Jane towards the beautifully decorated church. Ever since he learned of his ascension to the status of an angel from the Ancient One, he had become less antagonistic towards Big G. While he was far from a regular Sunday church visitor, he had attended some gatherings in several churches. He was not the only one hedging their bets on the Big G at the moment. Most people in the US were far more churchy than usual after the events of last year. For now, heaven and hell were far too close for humanity to become pious overnight. Even staunch agnostics like Jane found comfort in faith after the tragedy that befell her family. So, he wouldn't be surprised if the families in states like Nevada turned hardcore believers overnight. It was a bad year for atheists in the Western Hemisphere. After a silent prayer session, Syrian led Jane towards his Chevrolet Camaro, but finding two familiar faces near the parking space near his car made him blink in surprise. "Do you know them?" Jane whispered, noticing his reaction. "Yeah," Syrian muttered, staring at the two Eternals near his red Camaro. "Wonder what Gilgamesh and Thena want." Syrian eyed the two Eternals sitting across from him, nursing 2 cups of coffee in their hands. "So, it has been some time," said Syrian, nodding at Thena. "I thought you went back to hiding for whatever reason." "Not hiding. After our last encounter, I needed some answers, and we felt it was better to consult an old friend," Thena said with an air of awkwardness hanging around the duo. Syrian looked between the two Eternals with a critical eye. He was not exactly sure what they were doing here. It was also weird to know that he got tailed in the first place. So far, he had blocked out his super senses so that he could hold a normal conversation with Jane without some random event distracting him. Obviously, the normal is out of the window when super-powered beings are in the mix. Syrian thought before he stopped suppressing his senses. His sense blanketed the area, searching for anything else he might have missed. His ears picked up on the distant humming of a colossal spaceship floating high in the sky. The engines of the ship were nearly silent, but he could hear every slight vibration that was coming out of the engine. There were also 2 more Eternals in the ship going by. The activity inside picked up by his ears. "So, what brings you here?" After your encounter with Thena, she started remembering things from her past that she was not supposed to remember. "We had to contact an old friend of ours to enlist their help to make sense of Thena's memories," Gilgamesh explained after a moment of hesitation. "I gather these memories do not hold good news," said Syrian, already having a good feeling about what this was about. He might not know the specific details of the MCU, but he had broad strokes of what was going on in it, even though he was a DC fan in the past. The Eternals were supposed to be guardians of Earth sent by the Celestials. They later split away and created a new civilization on Titan, the homeworld of Thanos, the Mad Titan. We were sent to Earth by a race of powerful cosmic giants called the Eternals. We arrived some 5,000 years ago to stop a predatory race known as deviants from consuming all intelligent life on Earth, said Thena. At least, we thought we were supposed to until I regained my memories a few months back. Syrian frowned at the 2 Eternals as they looked at each other with a troubled look. Let me guess. These Celestials are somehow the bad guys and have an alternate reason for sending you all here, said Syrian. Unfortunately, yes. Gilgamesh said with a grave face. Celestials implant their seed in young planets flourishing with intelligent life. This seed is planted deep inside the planet's core to absorb vast amounts of energy for the young celestial to emerge. When the intelligent life on the planet reaches a certain limit, the young celestial emerges from the planet's core, destroying the planet and all life in it, said Thena after taking a deep breath. We, the Eternals, were sent to planets to ensure intelligent life flourish and populate the planet so that the emergence could begin. The deviants posed a threat to the plan by invading host planets and devouring all intelligent life. So, we fought and killed them wherever we could find them across the cosmos. I see. Does that mean Earth has a celestial sleeping in its core? Syrian asked curiously. Yes. This planet is hosting a young celestial in its core, and we need your help to keep it from emerging from its slumber. You want my help to kill it? Syrian asked. The two Eternals looked hesitantly at each other before nodding slowly. Are you sure you want to do that? I don't think killing a celestial would be safeguarding Earth. What if the Celestials retaliate and destroy the planet for killing one of their own? Syrian asked, stumping the two Eternals. Seeing that the two Eternals didn't have an answer, he pointed out another glaring flaw in their plan. How are you even going to kill this celestial sleeping inside the Earth's core? He asked again, leaving Thena and Gilgamesh speechless. If what you say is true, we must first ensure the planet's inhabitants have a fallback home to depend on. After we've secured all the major species on the planet to another habitable planet, we can pursue the destruction of the celestial or maybe keep it in sleep mode for an indefinite amount of time. What do you say? We hoped you'd have a solution to remove the sleeping celestial without damaging the planet. Gilgamesh said frankly, dropping his shoulders in disappointment. Why would you think that? Syrian asked, even though he had a good idea about how to go about killing a celestial. After all, he had accidentally stumbled into that particular can of worms while mining vibranium from Antarctica. But he would only share the method with the Eternals after he had earned their trust. Besides, he had not perfected the weapon and had no idea whether there were any unforeseen consequences in using a bioweapon against a celestial. Synthesizing the space plague into a bioweapon was not exactly a safe weapon to deploy against cosmic giants that had power over matter, energy, and space. Your energy is very similar to a celestial. In fact, we believe it was Thena's exposure to your energy that facilitated the recovery of her memories, said Gilgamesh. Fascinating, Syrian whispered while frowning thoughtfully at the two Eternals. Do you think you can spare a few days with me on one of my bases on this planet? I'd like to learn more about these celestials, and we can discuss other options to protect this planet from this sleeping celestial. We'll have to discuss this with our friends, said Thena after sharing a silent conversation with her fellow Eternal. By all means, please. I suspect they're bored out of their minds hanging around in that ship of yours, said Syrian, jabbing his thumb towards the sky, making Thena's and Gilgamesh's eyes widen like saucers. Syrian observed the samples he acquired from the dead carcass of the celestial he found in Antarctica. It was a hassle to move the giant bodily remains of the celestial to Corin, but he managed it with the use of his space bridge. At first, he had thought to leave it there, but now he was patting himself on the back for having the presence of mind to move the remains to his base. Using his drones, he had Optima build a giant vault to keep the remains in isolation for study, and that was how he came across the invasive species that killed the celestial. He had charmingly named it the space plague because it acted like a plague inside the celestial's body. In reality, the invasive species was an insectoid creature that possessed a type of energy that was modifying the celestial from its basic building blocks of life. He didn't know what would happen once the condition ran its full cycle. He hoped the space plague would end up killing the celestial, but he was not sure that was the end result. Even now, the celestial he unearthed from ice is not entirely dead. Whatever process the space plague was using to infect its celestial host, it never ran its course, as both of them were frozen deep in billions of years of ice until he unearthed them from the continent and secured them in a vault. "So, what exactly do you want me to do?" Bruce asked, joining Syrian. "Study the infection, Bruce. I want you to study the insects and, if possible, extract a pathogen that can mortally attack the celestial cells," said Syrian. "Is that really necessary? These celestials appear to have turned a blind eye on Earth for this long." "Maybe they lost interest in our planet," said Bruce with a troubled look. "You only know as much as I do about these celestials, which is almost nothing. Let's not jump to conclusions and hope for the best. That has never worked for any primitive civilization coming in contact with an advanced one. Ask the Indians. They know it better than anyone else," he added as an afterthought. "I suppose I could try my best," Bruce said with a sigh. "Thank you, Bruce. Optima will help you every step of the way." Syrian patted the friendly scientist on his shoulder. "I look forward to working with you, Dr. Banner," said Optima, materializing a virtual womanly form near Bruce, startling even Syrian. He quietly withdrew and observed the two while they discussed what should be done about the remains of the Celestial. It didn't concern him that Optima was slowly rewriting her own code to better interact with everyone. Syrian suspected it had more to do with Optima's desire to converse better with Bruce, as the friendly doctor was Corin's sole permanent resident. But that would change soon, as he planned on filling the island with a significant human presence. The work on that front was progressing, and he just needed to outsource some of the recruiting work. Turning away from the duo, Syrian looked out of the glass panes of his lab to see drones diligently engaged in constructing houses near the beachhead in a perfect arc. More were being built to house a proper human colony on the island. The island's interior was filled with tree houses that blended well with nature and the island's ecosystem. The plan was to create a human colony with minimal impact on the island's self-sustaining ecosystem. But once the Eternals came around to his way of thinking, he planned to start another base on Mars or one of Jupiter's moons. After all, he was only a few months from completing the world engine. He went down a few levels until he came face to face with the Bay Area where the world engine was being worked on. He had some modifications to the colossal machine to reflect the changes he required in terraforming a planet. High gravitational fields were no longer needed, so he had all the parameters of the world engine changed. Mostly because he had no intent on recreating Krypton in this universe or cloning Kryptonians. The only reason he had even started building a world engine using the data from the archives was because he was hoping to terraform Mars and use it as a base. Failing that, he was hoping to create a base in one of the innumerable moons present in the galaxy. Placing all his eggs in one basket was not a mistake Syrian was willing to commit. Therefore, distant bases outside and inside the Sol system were his goal. That way, he could continue operating uncontested even if he was forced to abandon Earth for whatever reason. But seeing the world engine reminded him of the cousin he was separated from while escaping Krypton. "I hope you're safe, Cal." Syrian stepped onto the stage, greeted by the excited cheer of the crowd gathered inside the expo venue in Mountain View, California. Like last time, the event was being streamed live on Ustream. Unlike last time, he had attracted quite a lot of national media as well, owing to the unprecedented success of his phones and other digital gadgets. Thank you. Thank you for your warm welcome and your patience." Syrian smiled at the crowd as they settled down while the screen behind him proudly displayed the symbol of his company. "I started Vex Corp as a software company, and within the span of a few years, we've grown out of that industry and branched out. That's because the motto of Vex Corp is to advance the world by advancing ourselves. We've embraced this motto to our hearts, and therefore, we've boldly expanded into telecom, medtech, electronic gadgets, social media, and cybersecurity. Today, I'm proud to announce 2 new fields Vex Corp is stepping in to compete. We're proud to announce we'll be stepping into the automobile and clean energy industry. The stage shook as a brand new car emerged from the bottom part of the stage. The car was slowly spun on the platform so the cameras could capture the vehicle from all angles. Its shiny, black, sharp silhouette attracted the attention of the audience. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Quark's Model X. It runs on hydrogen fuel, an alternative to the gas we use in our cars right now, as it's cheap and clean. In the following days, you'll see Vex Corp starting hydrogen fuel pumps across the great state of California and expanding outwards. Seeing that he had the room's attention, he flicked on the remote, and the screen now showed more data and features about Quarks. Sirian began explaining everything there was to know about the car and the hydrogen fuel-powered engine. He also took his sweet time introducing the audience to the Reborn project aimed at constructing a fusion reactor. It was his answer to all the hippies breathing down on his neck, and the board was quite excited to show it off for the easy PR work. Of course, only a select few on the board of Vex Corp understood the Reborn project was not merely a publicity stunt. Immediately after the press release, Sirian took the opportunity to bring the board members to the bottom chamber of Vex Corp HQ, where the reactor was situated. "So, you already had the reactor up and running?" one of the board members said, observing the dormant reactor. "Yes and no. We've run some preliminary tests, and the results were promising. However, the reactor has never been active for more than an hour as per the guidelines approved by the board," Sirian explained. "So, you're confident it works?" "More than confident. As you all know, many past attempts have been made to create a sustainable fusion reactor. The problem has always been with the dense energy consumed by the superconducting coils that create stabilizing magnetic fields. We've managed to achieve a net positive fusion reactor," Sirian declared. "So, that means we're the only private entity in the world with a working prototype of a fusion reactor in the world," a board member breathed, eyeing the 20-foot tool reactor hungrily. "I think I can speak for everyone here that we'd like to see the Reborn project go ahead in full swing. The implications of its success are not something we can ignore. With nuclear energy bottlenecked by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the Reborn project could supplant nuclear reactors across our nation." The board members whispered excitedly, already formulating plans to commercialize the Reborn reactor. Sirian had also come to the same conclusion, considering his knowledge of the actual energy output of the reactor once he updated the core. For now, he kept a bulky design and a low-yield core for the reactor. The plan was for a progressive scaling down to be done on the reactor design with an increased yield core generating more energy. The current energy estimates were well below the yield of a standard first-generation nuclear reactor but more than enough to be an improvement over other clean energy projects based on solar, geothermal and wind. The best estimates resulted in a net energy yield of 9,000 megawatt-hours if the Reborn reactor ran unimpeded for 24 hours. In a year, the reactor should theoretically generate 3,285,000 megawatt-hours. The overall plan in Sirian's mind was to spread the first-gen Reborn generators in California and the rest of the states within a 5-year span and supply the generated energy to the national grid. After the first 5 years, he could introduce certain modifications to the reactor and build more energy-efficient reactors. The progression could continue until the Reborn reactors could outproduce the daily output of third-generation nuclear reactors. In 15 years, I'll have the nuclear power plants shut in the country. I'll need some lobbying done in the Senate to push that through," Sirian thought. Thomas Eckhart pushed his wheelchair despondently towards his kitchen. When he neared the kitchen cabinet, he desperately searched for his coffee mug. With some luck, he found the mug and rolled his chair towards the coffee maker. On the way, the cup slipped from his lap and fell on the floor. His eyes were drawn to the immobile cup lying on the floor, and his attention was drawn to his absentee legs. He felt the all too familiar feeling of his lost limbs, but he could see as clearly as day. Everything below his knees was air and nothing else. Phantom limb. Thomas thought grimly, remembering the words of the military doctor and counselors after he returned from the Arabian Peninsula. He tried to reach for the cup, but it wasn't easy to pick it up. In the end, he abandoned the attempt and rolled himself to his room without the coffee. His eyes fell on the .22 Magnum revolver near his bedside table. Immediately, his mind was bombarded with the sound of gunfire and screams. The scent of blood and sweat suddenly came into his nostrils, and then the sound of an explosion followed by pain. God! Thomas slammed his eyes shut while taking several deep breaths to center himself, but his heart was beating like there was no tomorrow. Tears streamed down from his eyes, realizing that he was all alone. He had been drafted into the army when the war against terror broke out, and when he returned, he was a cripple, and his dad was dead. He was now alone in his house, barely scraping by without a job. He slowly rolled himself on his wheelchair until he neared the table and picked up the gun. Taking a gulp of air, he pressed the barrel of the pistol against his head. Screwing his eyes shut, he began to take deep breaths as he tried to find the nerves to pull the trigger. He stayed like that for a full 5 minutes until he found the courage to end his suffering. Taking one last steady breath, he pressed on the lever. At least, he tried to, but the lever didn't budge. Dying is easy, but living, now that's the braver option. Thomas's eyes widened as he heard a smooth voice speak from behind him. When he turned around to look at the man, his eyes couldn't help but widen further. Standing behind him was a man dressed in bright silver armor with wings that shined with starlight. Good God in heaven! Thomas breathed. You've lost hope and are blinded by the darkness of despair. Let me bring you to the light. The angel spoke, and Thomas was consumed by light. Syrian took a page out of Ames and Hydra's playbook. Over the years, he had been keeping close watch over the activities of both organizations from a safe distance. Hydra manufactured events that broke the minds of their prospective recruits and later built them ground up before recruiting into their cabal. There was a surgical precision and process behind Hydra's recruit drive as they broke every tether that bound their recruits in the world before making the Hydra agents. It was an effective method, but it was also one of the reasons why Hydra remained a minority within S.H.I.E.L.D. They could not aggressively expand their operations or the recruit pool for fear of discovery. What they lacked in quantity, they make up for in quality. Besides, the current scope of Hydra's existence called for a compact organization that waged war using intelligence and causing chaos behind the lines. They were not strong enough in muscle power yet. Their effectiveness depended on anonymity. AIM was another creature entirely. They recruited their muscle power from former Navy SEALs and Marine Corps. The little bastards were tied up close with drug gangs and used those connections to recruit their grunts. They also recruited disabled veterans by offering them their magic cure, which was an unstable element. But Syrian saw the merit in these two organizations. Taking valuable lessons from these two organizations but also seeing the defects for what it was, he pitched a whole new drive. Syrian also mainly concentrated on the veterans. Post 9/11 attack and the war, there were no shortages of veterans discharged by the military. Some were absorbed into different branches of the government, but some unlucky few were left to fend for themselves. To create inroads into that diaspora of the populace, he used the social obligations of the corporate sector to get in contact under the guise of giving back to the community. Not only did he gain valuable insight into the private lives of many veterans, but he also connected with several support groups, social activists, and aspiring politicians. It was a win-win as far as he was concerned. The first few recruits were quite simple. Playing dress-up as an angel was pretty effective in convincing people to leave their shitty lives to work for him. It was not as if he was planning to turn them into mindless drones, terrorists, or, God forbid, into cliché villains. He targeted some of the worst vulnerable people suffering from alcohol addiction, drug abuse, bad cases of PTSD and crippling injuries. He had them transported to Koran and gave them the help they needed. Restoring their health was an easy affair. Krypton had mastered the art of cloning. Restoring lost limbs and purging drug dependency were easy procedures, especially for humans. Simply restoring their health was not the extent of his work. But he made Thomas, Derek, Bryn, Vincent and Michelle whole again in the truest sense. Once he restored their health, he had them engaged in a training program designed to enhance their tactical and self-defense skills. He mostly copied some of the stuff S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra agents went through during their training period using Proxima's interface. It was mostly mild stuff to get them back in shape and to get them familiar with their restored body. Welcome, everyone. If you've noticed why there are only 6 of you instead of more, don't worry. That's because you 6 are the first batch of recruits I tracked down. From now on, I won't be recruiting, as that job will fall squarely on you 6. Syrian said as he addressed the 5 men and 1 woman in the team. But before I say anything, I hope you've introduced yourselves to each other. Yes, sir. Good. Your time in the army might have prepared you for chaotic warfare and even controlled high-risk combat zones, but I'm here to prepare you for a war of a different scale. A different scale? Thomas asked. A war against hostile extraterrestrial civilizations that only know to wage wars of conquest and genocide on a planetary scale. Syrian said as images of hundreds of planets started popping up around the room with their massive fleet of ships. That's... Michelle looked at the images with wide eyes. Impossible. That's a lot of spaceships, and they're all huge. Bryn muttered. Yeah. That's not good. Derek said, casting worried glances at the images. Who are you really? Vincent asked, tearing his eyes away from the imagery and looking expectantly at Syrian. By now, Syrian had clarified that he was no archangel or even the measly Easter bunny. It had taken him some considerable effort to convey that he was no religious figure. But it was well worth it, in his opinion. The fawning and praying was horrible. Someone with an interest in seeing the human species survive intact through the coming storm. And for that to happen, I think the best option is to expand your species beyond the bounds of your planet. You want to use us to colonize another planet? Michelle asked with a frown. Yes. There are many uninhabited planets in the galaxy that can support life, and this is the best way to ensure the survival of your race. Why is our survival important to you, sir? Michelle asked eventually after a brief moment of silence. I am a survivor of an apocalypse. I do not wish to see it happen again, and the best way to ensure the survival of a race is to spread it out among the stars. Syrian answered honestly. He had thought much about what he wanted to do by recruiting humans. Ever since he had learned about the sleeping celestial in the Earth's core, he couldn't think about anything else but escaping the planet. The Earth was a ticking time bomb, and he had no idea how long it'd take for the celestial to emerge. According to the Eternals, the emergence would begin once the host planet reached the peak of its civilization in terms of population and collective consciousness. Maybe it'd not happen for 1,000 years, or perhaps it'd happen within a week. Either way, Syrian wanted no part in watching another planet explode. This was why he was expediting one of his old plans to move out of Earth and set up shop elsewhere. It didn't mean he was permanently moving out, but he wanted a fallback planet in case Earth became a pile of floating rocks when the space giant woke up from its slumber. The colonizing part comes later, as your planet is still safe. This is merely a precautionary action. It's possible that external forces might not even play a role in the destruction of your planet. You might do that yourself. Syrian said with a shrug. What do you mean? Thomas asked with a frown. The divisions in Earth's societies are too large to mend anytime soon. I'm afraid my own interference might have only made it worse. That's why I hope to enlist your aid in creating a new human settlement on another planet, but without the divisions you see now on Earth. To what end? Michelle asked curiously. So that there is a thriving human colony in case something happens to Earth. You're aware that the war in the Middle East is escalating to a level that is bordering a world war. You fear a nuclear holocaust? Thomas asked with trepidation. Hopefully, it won't come to that, but the latest intelligence I've gathered from the US government suggests that the higher-ups are planning to expand the war into Yemen, Oman, Iraq, Syria, and Iran. If this plan goes through, then the war will drag on for nearly a decade with a huge body count on both sides. The troubled look he saw among the recruits showed they understood the gravity of the situation. But why would? The shipping in the Red Sea is facing increasing attacks, and it's pulling NATO into a direct conflict with Iran and other local terrorist groups. Syrian explained the situation. It'll only take a small flare to light the powder keg. Michelle muttered with a thoughtful frown. Yes. Will you help me to ensure the survival of your race? Syrian asked. He could already see he had their cooperation. It was written on their faces. There are other reasons as well, and you'll learn them in time. For now, you need to prepare. Syrian watched from the balcony of his room as his newly recruited tactical team took on the obstacle course Optima had set up with the help of shielders. The tiny purple discs that provided energy shields by floating alongside them were a bit difficult to get used to. But they were perfect for ultimate defense. The shielders took away the need for any body armor, which increased the speed and maneuverability of the team. The beach was filled with light flares as the discs blocked all weapon discharges in the obstacle course. He didn't expect the team to get into trouble anytime soon, but it was better to be trained for that scenario. Intelligence agencies worldwide were no pushovers, and working under their radar would take time, great skill, and patience. He sat back in his plush chair and read the morning paper, enjoying the gentle wind caressing his face. So, you're going ahead with this plan of yours? A familiar voice asked from behind his chair. Syrian eyed the Ancient One out of the corner of his eyes as she moved closer to the railing, observing the team. The sleeping Celestial is a ticking time bomb waiting to destroy this planet. I think I'll sleep better on a planet that is not marked to explode anytime soon. Giving up so easily even before the battle had even begun. I expected you were far braver, Syrian. The Ancient One chided. There is bravery, and there is stupidity. You forget I've already lived through this situation once. Syrian eyed the bald sorceress with annoyance for disrupting his relaxing time. Are you telling me you've got no other motives, Syrian? He didn't rise to the bait and expose other reasons. He was intent on populating another planet with the human species. He had been experimenting with the warp drives he had collected from the Kree ships. Lately, he had thought of assimilating warp drives with the phantom drive technology of his Kryptonian ship. Theoretically, he was working on a new warp drive that could breach the folds of space, time, and reality itself. But he didn't say anything about those plans to the Ancient One. Trust me, it's better to extract as many species from the planet as possible and give them a home elsewhere. My people's ruling government dallied with their endless debates condemning our planet to mass extinction instead of sending Krypton's inhabitants to habitable planets. I won't make the same mistake again. Syrian said before going back to reading the newspaper. The Ancient One looked at him with suspicion. I suppose expanding humanity outside our solar system will not be a bad idea. If something were to happen to Earth, It'd be a blessing to have another planet ready to welcome refugees," she said while letting out a sigh. "I'm glad you agree. Have you spoken to Thena and the other Eternals?" "I have." The Ancient One nodded. "Then you understand the Celestials are not beings that should be easily dismissed. They've created many star systems that support life and destroyed many planets for millions of years." "I know. They're quite good at what they do," the Ancient One said softly. "And they have an army of Eternals to do their dirty work. Harming the sleeping Celestial might invite their wrath upon this planet. I understand the danger we're in, Syrian. That's why I've denied their plan to kill the Celestial." "Good." Syrian nodded, lounging back in his seat. "But I've heard from Bruce you're developing a bioweapon against the Celestials," the Ancient One said, looking expectantly at him for an explanation. Syrian let out an audible sigh. "Is there a problem?" she asked curiously. "Yes. Bruce has a big mouth," Syrian muttered. "So? Are you?" "Yes, but it's a last resort. According to Thena, the Celestial is sleeping at the planet's core. No bioweapon could survive the conditions of the Earth's core and afflict the Celestial. It'll be only during the emergence that we could use the bioweapon against the Celestial. That'd leave us with a short time frame to act," she said with a displeased look. "I know." Syrian sighed. "That's why I'm not as confident in depending on the bioweapon to our Celestial problem." Syrian saw the Ancient One absently hold the sealed time stone on her necklace. The Infinity Stones. That might be the answer to many of my problems, Syrian thought. But finding and holding them in my possession until my research pans out will be a hassle. He engaged the X-ray vision to look at the dreadnought in the bay. The ship had been ready for interstellar travel with an advanced warp drive, cutting down the time it takes for space travel. Syrian supposed it was time to seek out the stones, and he knew the first one he had to track down. Syrian kept his entire focus on structuring the parameters for the search to be conducted in the KRY archives. The data he had pulled from the old KRY base and the data cores he recovered from the KRY ships were a treasure trove of information. "What exactly are you looking for, sir?" Optimal asked. "A planet or a habitable moon with a peculiar temple occasionally submerged underwater. It has no known intelligent life forms. It also has giant geysers." Syrian answered as he typed down the last bits of command prompts in the program before he let it run. "Why this particular temple? Have you found this temple's deities worth worshipping?" Optimal asked. "No. What makes you think I'd start worshipping strange deities on a planet I've never even visited?" he asked, eyeing Optimal incredulously. "You've started celebrating the human religious festival of Christmas, the birth of Jesus Christ. Based on that data, I merely extrapolated that you found a new deity to worship. You've also started to pretend to be an angel the humans of Earth revere," Optimal pointed out. Syrian could only gape at the strangely logically sound argument from his AI. "I suppose you've got a point there, but I'm not looking for a deity to worship," he said with a shrug of his shoulders. "Then may I ask what you're searching, sir? Perhaps I could be of some help," Optima asked. "I'm searching for an Infinity Stone. The Power Stone is somewhere safely kept in a temple inside an orb. The planet had a civilization in the past, but they fell for some reason," Syrian explained. "This temple is underwater?" Optima asked curiously. "Perhaps," Syrian answered with a frown, as he didn't know all the details. "I don't know the planet's name, and I don't know what the KRY called the planet either. They have a penchant for naming different planets with alphanumeric codes," Optima reminded him. "Yes. That's also a problem. So, please go through the data the KRY held on different planets and cross-check them with the parameters I've included in the search program," Table a list of planets that checks out the parameters. It shall be done, sir. Leaving Optima to handle the data mining of the KRY archives, he took a mat, a fridge full of beer and some hot dogs and made himself a camp at the beach. After putting some oil on his body, he allowed himself to relax as he let the sun do the work. If only all my days were like this one. Sirian thought, enjoying the sun on his skin while the waves crashed into the beach. Is this really necessary? Thena asked. Absolutely, said Sirian, welcoming the four Eternals into the chamber where he had prepared all his advanced scanners beforehand for what was about to happen. I don't think this is a good idea. Druig commented with a disinterested look while leaning against the wall inside the chamber. You told me that your leader Ajak holds a communication device which she uses to keep the Celestials in the loop. Since we've established that you're synthetic beings, I suspect the Celestials hold a kill switch, so to speak. You mean Erishem would use it to kill us? Gilgamesh asked, exchanging a worried look with Druig. Kill, control or remotely wipe your memories so you won't work against the Celestial Prime Directive. Take your pick. Sirian said while calibrating the sensors one last time. Thena let out a sigh, but she climbed into the bed without complaint and lay down. Why, Thena? Why not one of us? Gilgamesh asked. Because she already recovered her past memories, and so far, there seems to be no failsafe that activated to suppress her memories or personality within her. It means the Celestials are unaware of Thena accessing her suppressed memories. You can't take the risk of any security measures activating within us if you were to do that same to us. Druig said with a thoughtful look. That's smart. I try. Sirian grinned. This is the best bet to learn eternal physiology. If I can study one of you, I can ensure your bodies remain in your control and not under the Celestials. You can access our brain, Gilgamesh trailed off in confusion about whether to call it a brain now that he knew he was not a biological life form. Your control module, yes. Sirian helpfully provided. The scans should give me a detailed view of your interior systems, which should help develop a safe procedure to deactivate any failsafe embedded in the others. We should have contacted Fastos. Gilgamesh commented after a moment of silence. No. He is too close to Ajak like the others. It's better to keep this between us. Druig disagreed immediately. All right, Thena. I'm going to fire up the sensors. You ready? Sirian looked up from the console he was working on. I'm ready. Let's do it. Thena said with a firm nod. Sirian activated all scanners in the chamber, and Thena underwent a full-body invasive scan. The interior circuitry and structuring of Thena's power and command core started to appear on his screen. Optima, analyze the data for outgoing transmission signals and communication devices. He ordered. There seem to be no working outgoing transmission signals, but I've identified an energy transmission module within Miss Thena, Optima reported. Sirian sat up in interest as Optima projected a small portion near the control module, which generated thoughts, stored memories, and controlled the body's motor functions. This part right here, Sirian said, pointing at the projected image. It seems to have the function of transmitting and absorbing vast amounts of energy and data. It is dormant for now, so you don't need to panic. But it is a cause for concern, right? Erishem could remotely access our bodies if he so wished, Thena asked worriedly. Yes, it's possible. Sirian nodded. Then we must find a way to prevent that from happening. Druig said firmly. I'll start working on modifying the receptors within your body. It'll take some time as I need to study your core systems before I make any modifications. Why are we doing this? Jane asked as she faced Sirian in combat. She was dressed in form-fitting attire Optima provided. Most of her attire was made of Kevlar and some other unidentified material that allowed her flexibility. She had a half-sleeved Kevlar top, black pants, black boots, and a tactical belt on her waist. There was some equipment in her belt, but she had mostly glossed over the monotone explanation provided by Optima. She had no prior experience with self-defense or anything remotely related to physical activity. Sure, she had the standard gym class in school, but she was not exactly an active participant. Understandably, she was a little cross with her boyfriend for inviting her to his cozy island and asked to engage in a friendly spar when they could be cuddling in bed or sunbathing. Your body has undergone terrigenesis, and you were treated with a modified super soldier serum to combat the infection. It's time that we test the extent of your powers. I'm all for testing my powers and limits, but we could be doing something else now. Jane said coyly with a wink. First training. After that, we'll see. Syrian said without hesitation, making Jane pout. Ever since her boyfriend had a heart-to-heart talk with the group called Eternals, there was a drastic change. There was a flurry of activity on the island base, and Syrian was busier than usual. The number of rescheduled dates had gone well above 10 in the last 4 months. When an invitation came from her boyfriend to the island, she had hoped for an intimate getaway. Instead, she was saddled with physical training. All right. Let's get this over with, she sighed, raising her arms in a defensive posture. Jane surged forward and threw a right hook, the only form of self-defense she had in her arsenal. Syrian easily deflected her punch, and so began their bout. What's the point of this exercise? I might be stronger than the average human, but I'm nowhere near as fast or strong as you, said Jane while attempting to kick the legs out from Syrian, but at the very last moment, he evaded her easily. You're right. You're not strong enough. Syrian caught her right fist while she tried to punch his abdomen. Jane tried to elbow Syrian but found her left hand locked behind her back. You're not fast enough. Jane tried to exert strength on her limbs to break free, but her arms didn't budge an inch. If you're trying to get yourself banned from my bed, you got it, Jane bit out, glaring at her dense boyfriend. But to her surprise and fear, Syrian's eyes started to glow bright white. She knew he could blast concentrated pure fire out of his eyes. Enhanced or not, her bones and flesh could not withstand a focused blast of a laser beam from Syrian's eyes. Syrian? She looked at him with growing fear as she started to feel heat on her skin. Those who are not strong or fast end up dead, Syrian said coldly before he released the twin beams. Jane screamed and screwed her eyes shut. But when nothing happened to her, she slowly opened her eyes to see a bluish barrier holding off the laser beams inches away from striking her skin. What the? Jane stared in amazement at the force field that was protecting her. That's your true power awakened by terrigenesis, said Syrian, canceling the laser beams from his eyes. What was that? Jane shouted after she regained her bearings. You were trying to kill me. It was the only way to force your body to lapse from your human instincts and dip into your evolved self-defense mechanism. So, I've got control over some telekinetic field in my body, Jane said thoughtfully. Yes. Your power had manifested before on several occasions unconsciously and in a much subtler form. The threat to your life forced the genetic memory dormant in you to surface, giving your brain access. I see, Jane said. Suddenly, she scrunched her eyebrows together in concentration. Now that you've familiarized yourself with your power, we can revisit that offer of spending some quality time in bed. Jane didn't allow her dense boyfriend to finish that sentence as she blasted him away with a concentrated push of her telekinetic energy. Oh, yeah. I think I can get used to it, Jane thought as she smirked at the man-sized hole she had put on the wall through which she blasted Syrian. You want me to build a fighter aircraft capable of space flight and advanced shielding technology in a little under 3 years with a budget of $150 billion? Syrian asked incredulously, staring at Nick Fury, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of the Air Force, and the Chief of Staff. Yes. Is there a problem? Fury asked with his infamous one-eyed stare. Are you nuts? I'm already involved in modifying a squadron of F-18 Super Hornets, and I'm supposed to introduce energy shields in the F-35 aircraft under construction. Is that going to affect this new project? Secretary Pearson asked with a frown. Of course. If you had heeded my advice and expanded on the F-35 project with some of my modifications, you could have gotten a light combat spacecraft by next year. Is that true? Secretary Pearson asked in surprise as he stared at the Chief of Staff. The F-35 project was already approved and is near completion, Mr. Secretary. We could not afford to make radical modifications near the end of the project without proper consideration. Syrian internally scoffed at the weak explanation. The fact that the F-35 project had been a black hole for money, time, and labor was no secret in the government. Going by the look on the secretary's face, the reality had just dawned on the man as well. He supposed the new secretary was only familiarizing himself with the playing field. You won't need to start from scratch. You can make the modifications to this design, said Fury, holding out a file for his consideration. Syrian took the file, and he saw the schematics of the Quinjet inside. There were also the capabilities that SHIELD and the Air Force wanted on the crafts in question. The energy requirements for this proposed craft won't be satisfied with the current power plant, Syrian said as he flipped a page. Then change it, said Fury. The rocket thrusters and the wings profile will have to go. I can make more efficient ion thrusters for space flight and EGRAV propulsion engines for initial liftoff. That's your discretion, Vex. You can expect a visit from an expert team from SHIELD and the Air Force. If you convince them to sign off on the design and overall functionality, you'll get the green light to proceed, said Fury. Fine. Syrian sighed loudly before addressing Fury. But we'll have a discussion about that budget. You can't expect to build a light combat spacecraft with less budget than that useless F-35. We'll take that into consideration. Fury nodded. Useless? Did he just call our most advanced fighter useless? Secretary Pearson asked the Chief of Staff and Fury incredulously while Syrian walked out of the conference room at SHIELD HQ. Outside the conference room, Maria Hill was waiting for him. How did it go? Maria asked as she walked with him to the shuttle bay. They want a brand new fighter spacecraft. Although I haven't the foggiest clue why you people are after it now. The second Kree invasion has spooked many people in SHIELD and the government. Now that they know we're on track to modernize the Air Force squadrons, they want to exert military presence in space, said Maria. Yeah, right, Syrian snorted. If the safety of Earth were the priority, they'd have gone for the long-range ion cannons I proposed for orbital defense instead of spacecraft that are going to be useless in case of a major alien incursion. For the record, Director Fury supported your idea. He also thought focusing on orbital defense would yield better results than trying to make a spacecraft. The director thought we'd be severely outnumbered by a major space power if they visited us with a substantial fleet. He's not wrong. Too bad his superiors can't see the bigger picture, Syrian muttered. Something you're familiar with, Maria stated. Syrian eyed the woman who was his point of contact in SHIELD. You've read what happened to my planet. Yes. You painted a bleak picture, she commented without showing any genuine emotions on her face. Sometimes there comes a point in the spinning wheel of civilization that the aggregate knowledge and political systems churned out become shackles to the very spirit and to the detriment of that civilization. I hope you have what we didn't when that time comes. What's that? Maria looked at him with a frown. Time for correction, Syrian said as he slipped a drive discreetly into her hands once they neared the helicopter. Tell Fury to be discreet. You can't trust your own shadows, he whispered to Agent Hill before he boarded the jet. Syrian kept his eyes on his laptop screen as he studied the data Optima took from scanning the Eternals. He had developed a device capable of rerouting the energy and transmission flow inside the bodies of Thena, Druig, Gilgamesh, and Mac-Carry. There was no conclusive evidence that the Celestials had some other way of controlling the Eternals, but they were free from any foreign meddling for now. The chance for a detailed study of Eternal physiology also allowed him to help Mac-Carry gain the ability to speak. The poor woman was so overjoyed when he broke the news. The rest of the Eternals were not any better. They were quite happy to be free of the proverbial leash on their necks being removed. With their newfound freedom, they swore to help in the process of rebuilding a human civilization on another planet. It was all sweet and dandy, but Syrian extracted something highly valuable when he helped the Eternals. Syrian opened a folder in his laptop named Eternals, and inside it were the schematics of their physiology, core systems, and neural scheme. The data would help him in creating Eternals of his own in time. But the most remarkable find was the power source that he found within the Eternals and the power storage within their body. He was still working on re-engineering the whole tech he found within their bodies, but he was pretty sure it was a device capable of amassing energy from subspace. Even though he was working on unraveling that sophisticated power source, the neural scheme and self-replenishing synthetic body were now in his database. Even if he could not replicate the Eternals in their entirety, he could do the next best thing by creating a humanoid robot. After all, he needed a body double on Earth if he wanted to search for the Power Stone in the broader galaxy. For the rest of the flight, he worked on designing his version of a humanoid robot capable of working as his body double on Earth. He only had some minor adjustments left before he sent the design for production in Corin. The modified design could also function as a viable replacement for the Kryptonian drones currently in operation. Optima had talked about humanizing the drones in the past, but now that his base was getting more human presence. These are incredible. Do you realize these robots' potential in the manufacturing industry? Bruce asked in awe as he watched a batch of humanoid bots working diligently on the city. Yes, I know. I'll probably put millions of humans out of work, Syrian said, observing the bots work on some much-needed modifications on the old Kree city. Are you? Bruce asked curiously. No. Not unless Earth's population dramatically falls in the next decade. So, not ever. That's for the best, Syrian said with a shrug. While I'd make a killing out of selling these bots, I'd probably be responsible for society breaking down. Yeah. So, what do you plan to use them for? They'll function better as a workforce in the city. I've been planning some modifications to the city, and I think some extra bots would go a long way in speeding up the work. Do I need to know what they're doing? Bruce asked. They'll be adding some shields to the city and some remodeling. You expecting an attack? Bruce asked with some surprise. After all, the island was protected by a magical spell. There were very few entities capable of breaching the spell put up by the Ancient One. No. But it doesn't hurt to be prepared, Syrian said with a shrug of his shoulders. Knowing the type of threats out there, he wouldn't put it past some eldritch abominations to find his island and mess things up despite the Ancient One's assurances. It was also curious that the Ancient One hadn't tried to dissuade him from searching for the Power Stone. If she had the power to see the future, then surely she could see that he was after an Infinity Stone. So, I've been meaning to ask. You said you want to find this Infinity Stone. Bruce started as they walked away from the bots doing their work to the main lab. The Power Stone, Syrian helpfully provided. Yes, that. Why exactly are you bringing that planet buster into our airspace? Bruce asked a bit hysterically. Planet buster? Syrian asked with an amused tilt to his face. The Kree archives hold some references to the stones. It said the Celestials used the Power Stone to decimate planets in the past. You don't have to worry, Bruce. I don't plan on destroying the planet. Syrian patted the man on his shoulders. That's not the point. Bruce said with frustration. What's the point? Syrian asked as he walked into the lab and began typing away some protocols while Bruce continued to air his doubts. Some of the projected energy outputs in the archives of that particular stone are off the charts. In the right hand, it could shred Earth and turn us all into space dust. Don't worry, Bruce. I have no intention of holding the stone inside Earth's atmosphere. Oh. Bruce muttered before it fully registered in his mind. Wait. Then where are you going to? Bruce trailed off as a planet suddenly appeared in the holographic display. This is a planet the Kree call C-24. It's a mining planet under the Kree Empire, just under 3,000 light-years from Earth. The planet doesn't have any known inhabitants, but it has a nourishable atmosphere. It'll be a perfect spot to set up shop. Syrian said happily. Most importantly, the planet revolved around a young star, far younger than Earth's sun. If anything, the planet would only accelerate his ascension to a higher level. Kal-El had a better part of 3 decades to get where he was in strength by absorbing the radiations from Earth's sun. In comparison, Syrian only had 4 years. So, according to the telemetry he received from the few satellites he had sent to scout the C-24 and its sun, the radiation levels were stronger compared to the Sol system. It was a perfect spot in case Earth was lost. It was also far away from Earth but also accessible by his modified hyperdrive within 25 minutes. But I thought you were looking at Titan as a viable spot. Bruce said with a frown. That was before I decided to go after the Power Stone. Keeping the stone close to Earth might attract the wrong sort of attention, said Syrian, thinking of Thanos. The Mad Titan was on a crusade to collect all the Infinity Stones. Granted, Thanos only started to pick off the stones one by one a decade into the future, but that was irrelevant at the moment. Wait a minute. Would the Kree allow one of their mining planets to become your base? Probably not. I'm not asking for their permission. Syrian shrugged, shutting off the display. I imagine that won't go over well. Bruce said tentatively. Yep. But Syrian was not worried about that. The Kree were no threat to him now that he had the Dauntless. He looked at the ship in question as it was being retrofitted with some additional ion cannons for the impending journey toward C-24. Chala always found the throne room intimidating for various reasons. Most of the time, during his younger years, it was because of the presence of different tribal leaders. But that no longer affected him after he underwent training to become the next Black Panther. Due to his perseverance and the blessing of the ancestors, he managed to overcome the trials and became deserving of the heart-shaped herb. He became a warrior blessed by Bast and became the sworn protector of Wakanda. But despite knowing his duty, his heart would be moved whenever the council gathered to make a decision, especially pertaining to the outsiders. Perhaps the influence of Nakia, who sympathized with the outsiders, made him question himself and the council in such matters. The alien is a threat to Wakanda. It is arming the outsiders with advanced technology that will threaten our safety. We must act now, the River Tribe Elder spoke firmly. The other council members also voiced their approval of the opinion. The war dogs have clearly stated that this alien is arming the Americans with advanced weaponry. He has already gifted the military with energy shields, which they adapt into their warplanes. Wabi spoke after throwing Chala a look. If we are to act, this is the time, my king. I agree. Chaka spoke shortly. Chala looked at his father and king to see what he'd say next, but his father remained in contemplation. It's true, this alien poses a threat. If the outsiders are allowed to advance faster, they'll start to detect our nation's advancements. No doubt they'll see us as a threat and will look to extract our treasures one way or the other. Chaka spoke softly but carefully. The rapid advancement of the outsiders was a threat. Chala acknowledged that. Once their technology advanced to a greater level, Wakanda would be hard-pressed to keep itself hidden from the greedy eyes of the world. However, Chala was not sure how long they could hide Wakanda. Already, many of the outsiders knew of the secrets and treasures of Wakanda. It was only a matter of time before Wakanda was forced to announce itself before the world. In the past, the Council and many kings of Wakanda had tried their best to stymie the technological advancements of the outsiders by assassinating their foremost scientists and engineers. Yet, the outsiders have mastered the power of the atom and touched the moon. Past kings might have managed to slow down the advancement of science, but they've never succeeded in stopping it. In Chala's mind, he saw hiding in Wakanda as a waste of time. Their borders were strengthened enough to withstand any incursions from outsiders. Perhaps their efforts were better spent on strengthening their neighbors so that Wakanda would have strong buffer states around its borders that act as a tripwire or a shield against the great powers of the world. But Chala dared not to voice such thoughts in the council. He was allowed to stand behind his father's throne strictly as Black Panther. As Black Panther, his duty was to obey his king's will. He did not have a voice here, nor did he have the leave of his king to voice his opinions. I have decided. This alien is a threat that we must eliminate. The latest intelligence from the war dogs indicates the alien is about to provide technology to help Americans with space travel. Soon, this alien might give them the technology for interstellar travel and even more powerful weapons. The council members nodded at the king's assessment. Chala. Yes, Baba. Chala walked around the throne and stood before the throne. The alien must die. Wakanda needs its protector to secure the safety of her people. The Black Panther is ready to serve. Chala said despite the turmoil in his heart. Good. We'll need to plan this carefully. There shall be no mistakes. This alien must die before he could do irreparable harm on Wakanda. Syrian hummed a jaunty tune as he cooked skewers on a grill outside his beach house at Baja Cove. It was a good day, all things considered. The 2004 elections were over with unsurprising victory for the current U.S. administration riding on the wake of military success. He wouldn't consider being in a quagmire with no exit strategy and an ever-expanding war in the Middle East to be a military success. Still, the current administration managed to market itself to the voters as such. The people agreed and re-elected the government to pursue the war to its logical conclusion. With the election fever over, business was back to normal. New defense contracts were flooding the market as NATO nations were also shouldering the weight of the war as it expanded into Iraq and Iran. Self-interest was the strongest motivator in decision-making. NATO nations, as well as the Russian Federation, were waking up to the cold reality that the U.S. might end up in the driving seat of a major share of oil deposits after it ousted the Arabian royal families. With Arab states falling like dominoes, the greedy oil barons were gunning to roll over Iraq and then face off the Irani regime. The craving for more oil and controlling the major source of energy on the planet was quite understandable. Whoever controlled the oil controlled a significant portion of the global economy. That was one of the reasons other nations were stepping into the Middle East, as they didn't want to see a massive number of oil fields under the control of the U.S. With the war taking a different direction and more nations pitching in, Syrian found himself quite busy. Everyone with a defense contract was busy these days, and that was what ultimately led Syrian to request a secret meeting with Director Fury. He decided to cut out Hydra when S.H.I.E.L.D. and the military started showing interest in shielding technology and interstellar travel. For 5 years, he had been preparing for this day. Allowing Hydra to go undetected within S.H.I.E.L.D. was the only way he could truly study them in their natural habitat. He needed time not just to find weaknesses in their organization but to track and predict the actions of Hydra agents. His relentless pursuit of data and surveillance had finally borne fruit. He was now in a position to cut out Hydra. But he was not interested in killing all of them. Nor was he interested in handing over their entire organization to Nick Fury. In his eyes, organizations like Hydra were inevitable in human society. So, he thought cutting out the valuable parts for his use was better than letting S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra duke it out in a shadow war. It was also one of the reasons why he never shared the intel with Nick Fury. Sirian looked up from the grill to see Nick Fury walking towards him in casual clothes. The director of S.H.I.E.L.D. had foregone his trench coat and was instead dressed in blue jeans, a yellow check shirt and a hooded black leather jacket. "I take it you were not followed," Sirian said as the director came closer towards him. "Yep. What's it that you wanted to talk about, Vex?" Fury asked. Sirian took some skewers out of the grill and placed them on a plate before offering them to Fury. "Thanks. You'll be interested to see this." Sirian pulled a file from the top of the mini fridge that stored his beer and offered it to Fury. Fury took the file and leisurely flipped through the pages. He could see the man stiffen as some of the atrocities committed by Hydra started to come to light from those pages. "I have a detailed list in this drive. Make sure that you open it on a system disconnected from any network," Sirian said while offering a drive to Fury, which the man pocketed without complaint. "How did you come by this information?" Fury asked in a composed manner. Sirian was impressed by the man's iron hold over his emotions even after the revelation of Hydra's existence. "I was looking for rogue agents who had connections with terrorist organizations. I didn't want the technology one transferred to S.H.I.E.L.D. to fall into the wrong hands. What I didn't expect was to stumble into an organized Nazi organization within S.H.I.E.L.D. "I see. I don't like the idea of you snooping on S.H.I.E.L.D. Fury said with a frown. "I don't like the idea of Kryptonian technology in the hands of terrorists across the globe, which leads to even greater conflicts. I don't like it either. But I also don't like to see people strolling through S.H.I.E.L.D. servers," Fury said, glaring at Sirian. "If this is the thanks I get for exposing a hidden enemy within your organization, I wonder what you'll say when I bring out the other great news." "What other great news?" Fury asked suspiciously. "How would you like to meet an old super soldier lost at sea during the Second World War?" Sirian could only smirk as he watched Fury's lone eye widen and his mouth drop open in disbelief.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going. Plus, it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.